Yeah. That's good because I talked to some people. They're not gonna do it. It's like we've had summer break. Long time.
Well,
Technically, we were here 2 weeks ago. Interested in reading the proclamation or
it does not matter to me. Okay.
I meant to text you and I keep. Excellent. Well, thank you all for being here for today's city council meeting. It's August 28th. And we'll first get started with the roll call.
Jessica Andrade. Present. David Plowsy. Here. Diane Crocker.
Here.
Matt Lehman.
Here.
Teresa Nielsen.
Here.
Jazz Jones.
Here. So first, we have a proclamation recognizing Hispanic and Latino Heritage Month. And I wanted to welcome our Inclusivity Committee Chairperson. I'm just going to read that.
The Proclamation Resolution 2318, a resolution proclaiming Hispanic and Latino Heritage Month 2023. Whereas Hispanic and Latinx culture is tied to Iberian ancestry, and our culture recognizes that Hispanics and Latinxes are multiracial and multicultural, who can trace their historical roots to Indigenous and African ancestry. And whereas Hispanics and Latinxes in Oregon are a diverse mix of first-generation immigrants and longtime residents. And whereas each year the United States observes National Hispanic and Latino Heritage Month by celebrating the culture, heritage, and countless contributions of those whose ancestors were indigenous to North America, as well as those who came from Spain, Mexico, the Caribbean, Central America, and South America. And whereas the National Hispanic and Latino Heritage Month holds an indelible place in the heart and soul of our nation and reminds us that the American identity is a fabric of diverse traditions and stories woven together. And whereas since the beginning, our country has drawn strength and insights from Hispanic and Latinx writers, scientists, soldiers, doctors, entrepreneurs, academics, and leaders in labor and government. And whereas our culture has been enriched by the rhythms, art, literature, and creativity of Hispanic and Latinx peoples. And whereas many of our deepest values have been informed by the love of family and faith that is at the core of so many Hispanic and Latinx communities. And whereas we reaffirm that diversity is one of our country's greatest strengths. And whereas we acknowledge the Hispanic and Latinx leaders who have struggled for equal justice to ensure that everyone in this nation can contribute their talents and have the opportunity to thrive. And whereas, as we look ahead, we will encourage our national leaders to build a fair, humane, and orderly immigration system, supporting a pathway to citizenship for those with temporary protected status, as well as farm workers and other essential workers. And whereas we will support keeping alive the torch of liberty that has led generations of immigrants to this land seeking new opportunities and a better future. And whereas the Hispanic and Latinx community is integral to the fabric of our Philomath business, education, cultural, agriculture, and religious community. Now, therefore, the Philomath City Council does hereby proclaim September 15th through October 15th, 2023 as Hispanic and Latino Heritage Month in honor of the many generations of Hispanic and Latinx leaders who have helped build this country and continue to fight for equality and justice, and call upon all Philomath citizens to observe this month with appropriate ceremonies, activities, and programs that celebrate Hispanic and Latinx heritage and recognize the impact Hispanic and Latinx peoples have had on our nation. Passed by the council this 28th day of August 2023.
Thank you very, very much for that. We really appreciate it. And I'm going to sign that here.
Those resolutions to put on it.
We had, that's a resolution? Okay, well, I just signed it anyway.
Point of order.
Any discussion of that resolution? I just want to really thank the Inclusivity Committee for pulling it together and drafting it. I really do appreciate that.
Ask who wrote it.
It was a joint effort. We had Van, he looked at the president's proclamation from last year. And I think it was from last year, and then I added some of the first two lines from some of the Oregon proclamations that I looked at. And then we had some edits from the committee members.
Very well done. Thank you.
So all in favor of passing resolution 23-18, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. No. Sorry about that all. It's been like 6 weeks or so. So I'll move that we pass resolution 23-18.
I'll second that.
I'm all in favor. Raise your hand, say aye.
All right.
Now I have a question. In honor of this, has the Inclusivity Committee looked into any activities or things has anyone been approached? Has approached the committee to organize something for this celebration?
Not an event necessarily, but we have contacted the library to ask for a recommended list of books, podcasts, movies, television, media, to be able to point the public to that.
No celebration per se. The reason I'm asking is because when we had our frolic parade, I spoke to the group that came, the dancers. Did you see the Hispanic dancers? I speak Spanish, so I spoke with them and they were really glad to come to Philomath. And then, I don't know if you're aware, but there's a Spanish speaking church that also meets in Philomath that mainly Hispanic mix individuals. That maybe we could approach one or both of those groups and see if there's something that I could do as a city. And I don't know other celebrations we've had in that have been, do we have any? Yes.
I wasn't aware there was a Spanish speaking church.
Well, it occupied, they don't have their own church, but they use a building that is in Philomath and they meet as a group as Spanish speaking individuals as part of their worship. Yes. So I would be willing to reach out and see. Maybe the Frolic has a number for the. I didn't get it. I spoke to them about appreciating them being there at the Frolic Parade, but maybe some Frolic organizers has a number that we could reach out and contact them. And maybe if we could maybe waive park fees or something to allow them to, this community to use one of our parks without fees for a celebration in honor of this. Sorry, just an idea.
There's music in the park over for this.
That was a lot.
Yesterday was the last event, musical park.
I know it's really hard because of the timing that's required to do things in advance. It requires the Inclusivity Committee meeting, the Inclusivity team to do things 3 months before the actual declaration. But if the timing was appropriate, I would ask that the Inclusivity Committee take some action. But
well, our next meeting won't be until the end of September, halfway through the month. So I guess if you wanted to do something and then let us know what it is, like what you're working on, and then we could potentially contribute and like meet in our September meeting, discuss how we could help. But yeah, I don't see the committee being able to do anything at this point on our own.
Chris, you're working on finalizing the newsletter
for September 1st, and we did put a piece in there about the proclamation
Thank you.
and encouraging support and celebration.
Thank you. So is it possible to waive fees on park usage or is that not allowable? So we run the city park.
Yeah, so we don't typically for Kugler Shelter, we're very specific on the organizations that we waived that for in the past. But it's not uncommon for somebody to step up and pay it. It's a fairly nominal amount really for a reservation. So in the past, when that's conflicts come up, somebody just stepped up and made the payment. But again, it's something the council could address in the future if there's other groups that we want to open that up to. In the past, when the councils looked at that, there's expenses that go into there for cleaning and janitorial and all that, again, are fairly nominal, so we tend to try to keep the cost low for everybody and just pass those on. But it's kind of a different discussion. To me, the tricky part is if somebody comes to the city and wants to put on an event, rent of the space is one of the lower expenses that comes with that. There's insurance that comes with it, and there's a whole host of other things that come with putting an event on. So if it's going to be a city event, then the city is carrying liability and insurance for those, and we'll look at that. And yeah, they do tend to take a little bit more planning than what most people think. So I don't want to say no. I'm just saying it's tough to do things quickly. I mean, we've recently had a Pride event that's been coordinated kind of with oversight and support of the Inclusivity Committee, but again, that's not when the Inclusivity Committee has jumped on and said, we're going to do it. It's been individuals in the community that have really put that on with some support because it just takes a lot of time and dedication. I think you hear from Rose that it is a lot of coordinating, a lot of work to put something like that together. And it takes time. So if we could do it, it would just take dedicated volunteers willing to put it on.
Councilor Parker?
I am in great support of your ideas. I think if we started 3 weeks prior, that would have been better. And so maybe we plan to do that next year, but we really have to buckle down and do it and get something done so that, and I think for many of, we've got recognized people almost every month, and it would be great to get started and do that but it does take time. I mean, and I have done the veterans stuff and that takes months, something, so.
Well, I think it's a great idea, and yeah, I think it's something that we should continue to talk about. And Inclusivity Committee is doing great work and trying to get into a regular rhythm and calendar of trying to think ahead of time. I know it's challenging because we're all really busy, but really appreciate you pulling that together. Thank you. Next, we're going to go ahead and have a public hearing. So first, got a new script. So first, we're going to have this public hearing, and it's a right-of-way vacation, Hedrig Street on 16th or at 16th. And so it says file number.
Just Hedrig Street at 16.
Okay. Okay. And the owners. No pond crossing. Yeah. So the order of tonight's
Owner is the city, the applicant for the vacation is Mill Pond. It's vacations don't fit neatly in our process, but Luba has made it clear they think these are land use decisions.
Right.
So.
Okay. So the order of tonight's proceedings shall be that we'll first have a staff report, followed by the applicant's presentation, public testimony in favor of the application, public testimony in opposition of the application, neutral testimony, then have council's question of staff, rebuttal by the applicant, proponents and opponents, have council deliberations, and then a final decision. So do we have anybody signed up to speak?
Several phone calls from area property owners who wanted to know what a vacation was other than a trip to the Caribbean. And once it was explained to them, they seemed to have no further issues.
Sure. Okay, thank you. So Persons testifying either orally or in writing may request a continuance to address additional documents or evidence submitted in favor of the application. If such a request is made, please identify the new document or evidence during your testimony. Persons testifying may also request that the record remain open 7 additional days to submit additional written evidence. Requests for allowing the record to remain open should be included in the testimony. So with that, public hearing is now open. And does any council member wish to declare any conflicts of interest? Seeing none, does any council member wish to declare any ex parte contacts or site visits?
I did make a site visit this morning.
Sure. Okay, are there any objections on jurisdictional grounds, meaning that the council is not the appropriate body for this hearing? So land use decisions such as this case under consideration this evening are evaluated against applicable criteria from the Land Development Code and Comprehensive Plan as presented in the staff report. We will now hear the staff report.
Great, thanks. I'll provide that. So the agenda item summary is served as a staff report on this. As reported, this is really a decision that was made required because of the major modification that was approved by the Planning Commission, where the subdivision layout was changed in such that the street extension or future street extension is no longer needed because there's not going to be a future street there anymore. That's where the park's going to get moved up to. But because the plan had already recorded with these street extensions, it created this little pocket of right of way, which on the new approved plan is where 2 homes are going to go. And so this is the formal process, as Brewer said, that we need to go through in order to vacate a public right of way. Requires its own hearing. Everything else, you can't just say, well, we're just going to submit a new plat. It's not that simple. Neighbors, which has all been done. We have to hold a public hearing. Vacate the right of way or not. But again, the only property that's being vacated is what's necessary in order to bring that street line, the public right of way, to give us a straight line there. The only other little twist on this property is that when the phase 2B, I think, let me draw your attention a couple pages back. This is attachment A, 31C01 and packet. Looks like this one. You can see on this page, the shaded area is the area that currently right away that's going to be vacated. When it's vacated, it goes to the adjacent property owners. And so lot 68, which is 7,462 square feet, and lot 69, which is also 7,462 square feet, are going to gain this right of way. It's going to make those lots larger than all of the other lots. And as you can see, they're going to be about 60 feet deeper than all of the other lots. So the property owner, Mr. Miller's already submitted a lot line adjustment that's going to bring that back line west and in line with the rest of the back lines of the rest of the properties. So that application's been submitted already. Don't anticipate any problems with that getting approved. And it'll again just make these lots the same size, the same front property line, the same back property line as the lots that are adjacent to it on the north and to the south. So essentially just line everything back up the way it needs to be, rather than having 2 lots that are of them. So the intent is essentially just to move these more to the west about 60 feet. So that'll be the end result of this, which you don't really see in this application. All we're seeing in this application is that this gray shaded area is going to get vacated and it's going to be essentially become part of the lots that are adjacent to them. Mentioned in the ordinance, and again, don't want to get into the weeds too much here. There's a existing right of way or a couple of existing easements. One of them doesn't allow for access. The other is a new public utility easement. Those are included in this ordinance that passed as well. These are just standard requirements from the Public Works Design Standard for allowing, not allowing access to the public utilities within the new properties, which used to be vacated right away, so. Again, a little bit of weeds there, but that's all being looked at. I want to commend Ruth Post for working diligently on this, through several renditions of it, working with the city attorney, working with Mr. Miller's engineer, working with the county, working with who all got involved in there. So like,
Much more.
yeah, lots of hands. Right, so.
Some of it is easy.
So kudos to Ruth for pulling all this together and getting all of this lined up straight. It's been looked at. All that to say, it's been looked at multiple times. We've got some certainty that we've got it right. And feel pretty confident going forward. So I'm happy to answer any questions now, or we can wait till we get into discussion and I can answer them. But for me, from a staff level perspective, this is kind of a no-brainer. It's just really some house cleaning more than anything, just gets proper lines where they need to be adjusted to.
Criteria. If you look at the fifth recital, whereas statement in the ordinance. The things that the council needs to be able to determine are that the city doesn't need the barrier strip. Public interest would be furthered by granting the tract. To the private. Not to the public, but from the public. And then, this is a weird one because we're granting it to ourselves and then, and then vacating it. So those are the criteria, is that the public interest will not be prejudiced by the vacation, that it'll be furthered by granting the tract to the public and then vacating the tract, and that you don't need it.
And just add to that, sorry, and that there is a requirement when you vacate, you do have to get a certain number of adjacent properties actually come in and sign that they're okay with it being vacated, and they've met that criteria as well. That's kind of the first blush, is to do that. So again, from an administrative standpoint and from a staff standpoint, they've met the criteria, and nothing but we preclude the city from looking. Other than a determination that there is some prejudice to the city.
Like to add that from a public notification standpoint, in addition to meeting all the requirements of the Oregon statute or on vacations, we also mailed notices to all of the property owners within 300 feet north to south, and I think 400 feet east to west. That was not required, but we wanted to ensure that we have as much public notice as possible.
Thank you. Any preliminary questions, staff?
The affected properties here, are they have sold?
No, they're owned by Mill Pond Crossings.
This is just a reminder to anybody who might be online, failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the city or other parties the opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the State Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Nobody's raised anything, so they will not be able to later.
Thank you. So we'll now hear the applicant's presentation. Go ahead.
Nope. The applicant's not here tonight. Spoke with the applicant this morning, asked if it felt needed to be here. Well, I didn't think it was necessary, but I'd be happy to forward any questions. But no, he's not here this evening.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and move to public testimony. But there is nobody here still. Okay. There's no.
You can close the hearing.
We'll go ahead and close the hearing. Excellent. So we'll now move on. Are there any further questions of staff? Councilor Andrade.
Refresh my memory about the stop work order and whether or not. Okay, so looking at the staff report, it had said that the lot line adjustments haven't been completed yet. Can you please remind me whether the lot line adjustments were supposed to be in place before the stop work order was lifted?
Yeah, I'm gonna preface it with it doesn't really have a lot to do with this land use decision or the vacation. So having said that, no, the condition you're referring to is in order to commence with phase 3, all of the work for phase 1, 2, and 2B is to be complete, and that includes the lot line adjustments. So that's prior to starting anything on phase 3, but is not prior to starting reconstruction of the homes.
Oh, that's right. Thank you.
Any further questions related to the public hearing? No? Okay. So with that, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and we're gonna do this by roll call vote.
It is an ordinance. So I'll read the title. This is an ordinance vacating certain city property in Hedwig Street in its entirety in Mill Pond Crossing, Phase 2B subdivision, establishing dedication of the vacated right-of-way and reserving certain easements located in the city of Philomath, Benton County, Oregon.
And Ruth? Oh, wait, we need a motion.
No.
Nope. No, okay.
Roll call. Counselor on daughter,
Yes.
Ruth Cosby,
Yes.
Brian Crocker,
Yes.
Matt Wingman,
Yes.
Teresa Nielsen,
Yes.
and Charles Jones.
Yes. Well, thank you all. Appreciate that. Keep that little bit of housekeeping done. So next we have. Well, first, you're meeting with the actual ordinance.
We just.
That is, okay, so there's nothing.
That
further
was,
than
that was the
Close that.
decision.
All right, done. Brian Vogt. We have a presentation by Brian Vogt, next.
Where would you like?
Right up here. Get a seat right in the middle.
Perfect.
Thanks for coming to see us again.
I'm sorry.
Thanks for coming to see us again.
Thank you for having me, Mayor and council members. For the record, I'm Ryan Vogt. I'm the Executive Director for the Oregon Cascades West Council of Governments. Lots of familiar faces in the room, and it's good to see you all. Thrilled to be here today. Glad to be back. Really, I like to come out and just make myself available. I have a couple of updates and a few things to talk about, but otherwise, if there are questions, comments, or concerns, I'm happy to field those. So last time I was out, we talked a little bit about our first ever data report. They gave a little bit of information about our footprint in communities because, as one of our board members likes to refer to us as a friendly octopus, I think it has something to do with the kind of the width of services we're in. It's not always a lot of depth necessarily, depends on the service, but we are wide and we're in a lot of different things. And the commitment I made to you last time was that we would continue to build a data report so we could start talking about really what does the footprint for each individual member agency look like? Because it doesn't do you necessarily a whole lot of good to just understand the services that we're providing to Benton County, but rather you want to know, well, okay, great, Brian, what does that mean here in Philomath? And so we were able to provide that. Understandably, it's taken us a little while to get this meeting scheduled, and so it's a bit stale already. But I wanted to let you know that this is an ongoing body of work for us to try and articulate a little bit more about how we are present in your community and the types of services that we are offering. One of the things that's become very apparent to me in the course of collecting this data is that one, we are still emerging in our ability to get sound data, particularly on the senior and disability services side. We provide that service on behalf of the state, and the state likes to keep really tight fists on their data. And so it's really hard to talk about the number of families that are impacted in your community. We're still working on that. The other thing is, while it looks nice and it's got some great graphics and it's leaps and bounds further than the last time I was out here, there is still landscape. There is still an opportunity for me to squeeze some of this a little bit tighter or expand some of the numbers. And so what we will be doing is we are in the process of putting together a series of communications about a number of the programs that we provide. The thing that I know and also fear partially the most is that many of our services are entitlement services. So if you meet the eligibility guidelines, those services are available to you. You know, it's not a race to the finish. It's not the first 10 people who apply get them. It is, if you meet certain eligibility criteria, then some of these services are available to you. And I firmly believe that there are a number of people in the community who are eligible for some of our services and they don't know. And that may be a language barrier. It may be resistance to work with government. It may be that our marketing materials are not sufficient. Is really my hope over the course of before I retire, which that number keeps moving for some reason because I'm having too much fun. But over the course of the next number of years, I would love to be able to say that every person in our communities, every person in Philomath who is eligible for our services has been fully informed, has had the opportunity to engage, and has made a choice as to whether or not they want to work with our organization and receive those benefits. Right now, there are people throughout our communities who could greatly benefit, and they probably feel like they've not been given that choice. They just don't even know that. So, all that to say, marketing materials will be coming. City Manager Workman is aware of this. We've been talking about that because he's very active with other city managers. Mayor Jones is aware of so many things as a volunteer on not just our board, but on our executive committee. That means by extension, he's volunteered for about 9 other committees. And so we see him quite regularly. So I'm probably sharing information you all already know. Since the information in the report is a little bit stale because it was last year's report, I wanted to give you an update on a couple of other things we have going on, if it's okay. You're also welcome to give me the hook and walk me.
You got 4.5 more minutes.
4.5 minutes. Okay. So one of the things that we have been working on at the Council of Governments is many of our member agencies, particularly smaller member agencies, have been asking for additional support, mining for grants, help writing grants, and ultimately help administering grants. And so I'm in the process right now of trying to hire 3 grant writers. This would be a program investment for me. We have people on staff who do committed grant writing and assistance with grant writing, but I'm trying to bring 3 people on to do exactly that, to work particularly with the rural communities and our smaller member agencies, of which you fully qualify, to try and assist particularly with getting infrastructure funds out. Now, I don't know what the candidate pool is going to look like coming to the table, but the plan is as we get them on, I will fund them for a while so they can get to know the communities and figure out exactly what their needs are, work together. And if we find grants that are worth chasing, I will split the cost. So I will pay 50% of their salary and I will ask cities to supplement 50% of the salary. This is a way for us to share the depth of the resource and partially training ground and partially get this across the finish line where cities don't have to bear the full cost because sometimes grants don't come to fruition. The hope would be that at some point in time within the next couple of years, they are able to move enough volume of grants and cities are willing to push back to us the administration of some of those grants that they become self-funding resources. I'm willing to make a multi-year commitment at the 50-50 and see if it works. So that's on its way. And then kind of lastly, I've got a number of bullet points, but the last thing I really want to cover today, because last time I was out here, this council took particular interest in a body of work that we were advancing on behalf of the region that was really stimulated by the city of Corvallis. And that was the bias incident response study that we had moving. And that kind of report from Zelo International has come to a conclusion at this point They did quite a bit of work throughout the communities, engaging the communities in a conversation about how, particularly people of color in the communities for Lynn Benton and Lincoln experience living in the communities. And the extent to which they were willing to share what their experience looks like from a microaggression or bias standpoint, or really even some pretty hateful work. And ultimately, they came back with some recommendations. Now, if you've read the report, it's a pretty long report and it's pretty detailed. And I would say that the recommendations by and large are kind of, they're good and they're semi no-brainer-ish, but they weren't necessarily compelling or resourced in the way that I think my board still needs to grapple with, or individuals still need to grapple with if they wish to take this forward. So the recommendations really included celebratory events, kind of like what council was just entertaining a few moments ago, education events, trying to evaluate how council or local government runs business, to see, are there opportunities lost in terms of accessibility, in terms of invitation, even in terms of the language that we use? Are we exclusionary towards members of the public population? It did have one specific recommendation that my organization would hire one person, one full-time equivalent person, to be a liaison between the state's bias response hotline that's run by the Department of Justice and the communities. But I'm here to tell you today that it was a pretty, it was a pretty open-ended recommendation, and it didn't well articulate what the value of that recommendation was going to be. So that conversation has been broached with executive council for the first time this last week. I anticipate that there are conversations coming. I don't know. I can't read the crystal ball, so I don't know whether or not the COG will ultimately be the right resource for this. I do understand that through my several years working in this role, that the city of Philomath does take diversity, equity, and inclusion seriously. That you all are in many ways more advanced in the conversation than a number of your neighbors, and that the COG will always be there to try and assist to the extent that we can. I don't know whether or not all the member agencies for Lynn Benton and Lincoln will want the COG to take additional steps. And if we don't, that's fine, but I would certainly still be in a place of encouraging the city to continue to advance what you need for your community, and anything from that report that can help with any conversations you all need to have. We'll go that way. Thank you very much.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
In regards to your eligibility on one of it mentioned that you had 18,401 applicants that must have felt some food insecurity or needed medical benefits. From that 18,400, only 10,900 were eligible. That's a high eligibility, according to what I'm reading. It's on the
Oh, that's on.
third.
Okay.
Is that, that's not the full report? That's
No,
good.
that is the full report, not the Philomath.
Right. No. So what I'm saying is, with that being the case, when you think about that 7,000 individuals were not eligible, who thought there was a need. Do you ever evaluate those basis of eligibility to see if we need to modify or change because if an individual feels there is a need, and in this economy, I feel maybe we need to look at that. And
Yeah.
those are nearly 7,000 individuals that felt the need and that were denied that help. So
That's a fantastic question, Counselor. What I would say is that the staff that we have at the Council of Government, in my humble and personal opinion, are pretty incredible staff members, and I've worked at a number of different state agencies as well. And if we encounter somebody who is in need and they're not eligible, we don't just turn them, show them the door. So eligibility to get across the finish line for actually getting SNAP benefits or getting long-term care benefits or being able to have an in-home assistant or assisting with medical or daily needs does not mean that there is not really a safety net of other services through nonprofits, through our partnership with Community Services Consortium and things of that nature. So what you're looking at is an eligibility threshold for very specific services, but if somebody's not eligible, we do help them try to get connected to any other services they may be.
And where are those statistics within this report? Those safety net statistics?
They're not in that report because those will be handoffs to other nonprofits and other organizations. And at that point in time, we can't track their success indicators.
And how often is that eligibility basis evaluated for those specific services?
So most of the eligibility services that you're referring to, those are put together by the state Seniors and People with Disabilities Program. Some of that through federal and some of that through state Oregon administrative rules that they make those determinations. And we are contracted with the state to provide it on their behalf. And so we don't play a role in adjusting eligibility requirements. We kind of contractually provide them the same way that the state does. So there's consistent application across the entire state.
Thank you.
And I just want to mention, like, you would mention that there's room for improvement in the report, but I think the report is great. Thank you. Like, it really pulls together so much information. I especially like how you provide a community-centric version of it, just things that will be particularly relevant for us. So, yeah, I would appreciate you and your staff for doing that. So I think it's very valuable.
Appreciate that. And I probably should say, 2 weeks ago, we had our all-staff barbecue, our annual barbecue, which we not only love doing, but we love that you all let us do it here in your Philomath Park. These last couple of years, I am pretty sure we got all of the pieces of water balloon picked up. This was an interesting one because we're in the middle of bargaining season. There's always an interesting conversation going on between representative staff and management staff. And not only were we in the middle of it, but then we decided to do $1 a water balloon fundraiser for our Meals on Wheels program, where staff got to throw water balloons at management.
No, make some money, huh?
We raised $1,000. $400. I think we raised about $400. I can't tell if being one of the higher earners is indicative of people supporting me, supporting the program, or if I'm just slow moving target and I look easy.
Also, did you want to provide any update on maybe any new acquisitions or anything?
So I'd be happy to. So I am happy to announce, as I mentioned earlier, we are part of a regional footprint. So we exist in Linden and Lincoln County. Our economic development district also extends to Lane County. But we've been an entity for just over 50 years, 53 years now. We own a building in Albany. That's our main center of operations on Queen Street, and we own a building in Toledo. But we have always leased in Corvallis. And as of last week, we now own a building in Corvallis. And it is on 9th Street. It is right next to Sherry's. And it's right on the throughfare. It honestly is going to be the nicest looking building of the three that we currently occupy. And we're very excited. And in the back part of the building, there is back part of the lot, there is a residential house that was built in 1919. Today, I walked through that house for the first time. It has some renovation opportunities there. We're trying to figure out if we can get High Pennington or something to come down on a grant opportunity and turn it into a HGTV DIY project. But more to come there. We're very excited. In fact, we moved furniture in today. So we do run the Benton County's Veteran Service Office on behalf of the county commissioners. And they are moving into the building today. And I believe they begin seeing consumers there next week.
Very cool. And hey, Counselor Conker.
Hi, Dementia Warriors, we have a strong organization in Columbus.
Okay,
And I know that they have needs, the caregivers for the dementia patients are worn out completely, and they're actually trying to put together their own meals they freeze them and pass them out, but they could use a hand. Does that fit into your program at all?
so outside of our seniors and disability services program, we also do a number of the community services programs, and you've seen a handful of them in the handout here, like Meals on Wheels and the senior volunteer program and things of that nature. Many of those programs are volunteer driven and they don't have the same eligibility requirements. And so sometimes we can pop in there and help a little bit. So I'd be happy to pass on information if you're willing to share that with me.
And I think all of them, or at least 95% of them, are senior age, with disease that hits often in later age. And the caregivers are often senior age also, so it's a rough situation. They're doing well on the support for each other, but they could use some help.
So Counselor, my contact information is in that handout. I would love to have you send me an email. I can get you a card as well. Or there are a number of people in this room who know probably have my cell phone. So if you want to pass that information on to me, I'll be happy to get them connected with the community service program. And I did kind of subtly mention earlier that we are ever increasing our partnership with the Community Services Consortium. They see a lot of the same consumers that we do, but they have a different array of services. A lot of their money comes from housing and community services. But they also do the energy and weatherization program. They help with veterans and their VASH vouchers and they also help with other housing vouchers. They run the Lynn Benton food share. So there's all of this great crossover.
Oh, I just wanted to echo Chaz's compliments about the report. It was very interesting and wonderful to be reminded of the breadth of the services that you offer. But I wonder if you could remind me, how is the COG funded? Is it funded by the member organizations and the state?
So yes-ish. So there is membership dues for all of the member organizations. The membership dues are based primarily on population rates. We have 25 member agencies in the Lynn Benton Lincoln area. We actually reduced our dues this year as a recognition of the inflation that was happening and that people needed to be able to turn inward. I think that our membership dues, don't quote me, but it's very close to the sum total of about $300,000. That $300,000 is leveraged mostly for federal match. The annual budget is 52 million. So the $300,000 is really a drop in the bucket in terms of the money that we bring in. Our largest program by far is Senior and Disability Services Program that we administer on behalf of the state. That is easily 50 to 60% of the staff that we have. And that is the lion's share of the money that comes in. And our other probably largest single funding stream that comes into the agencies are non-emergency medical consultations. And you can see we do lots of drives even for you all, right? Almost 1,500 ride people back and forth to the doctor's.
Thank you.
I'm way past my 4.5 minutes.
You said you had 4.5 additional, but thank you so much, Brian. We really appreciate you being here.
Normally I would stick around because I love to hang out and be available, but I also see you have executive session and I have I thought I saw on the agenda an executive session and I have something back.
I got 2 hours before we get to that. I'm just kidding.
If you're gonna have a break before, then I'll stick around. Otherwise, if it pleases the council, I'll go ahead, make myself out, and anybody's welcome to contact me, and I'm always willing to come back if there's anything.
That was great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate you being here. Excellent. So there are a couple things that Ryan probably find interesting, but we'll just let him escape and we'll give him the summary later. So I thought maybe we'd go ahead you hit a couple more items on the agenda before we just take a brief break, just so we can keep our folks going. But public comment, do we have anybody sign up for public comment?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. And we have the consent agenda. We have a couple of minutes. Do you have any comments or?
I am a little confused about public comment. I know that we all received an email. Is that supposed to be read into the public comment? That's something we all know.
Yep, that's something we all have on record. On the consent agenda, any comments, edits? Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Excellent. So we have a motion by Councilor Lehman, seconded by Councilor Quasi. Any further comment? All in favor, please raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Next, we have a conversation about the ARPA funds. Revisiting some old business. Chris, you wanna?
Yeah, so I went into quite a bit of detail in the memo, and that was insightful for folks, and specifically, I was asked to look at actually 5 different things to get some pricing, a little bit of pricing back and a little bit more background. This was taken back from the survey that was done and the conversation that was had at the beginning of last month. And so provided that information, I'll just briefly touch that first project was the primary school. I did get, after I'd written this up, Gary at Public Works gave me a little bit higher number than that 1,200 number that I was going off of, which was my search for products and the number of products that we kind of talked about. To do a little bit better quality product, and maybe we're somewhere in the middle. His estimate was like $3,400 for something that he felt was coming from a manufacturer that he does business with, and a product that he felt a little bit more reliable on than what I was finding on my Google search. So I would update that number from $1,200 to $3,400. And then I'm impressed for that project. Generally speaking, that was the highest ranked project of the survey. And it was also the least expensive project that was included on that survey. So that's the background on there. And maybe I'll pause there. Any questions on the primary school pickup area improvement project? Specifically?
If this project is selected, I'd like to see some type of barrier that is more substantial than the one you've shown. I don't know how much traffic there is there, but it would be nice to have something that could actually deter a car. I think a skateboard can pretty well fly over the kinds of barriers you've shown here. And I prefer to have something more substantial, recognizing that that would undoubtedly increase the cost.
Yeah, I'll just say what got put in here was what came out of the recommendations from when we did the school traffic circulation study. This is what they recommended was a low profile, not necessarily low profile, but a 3-4 foot tall, something that would flex if I got ran over, so it could still stay longer. They didn't recommend any type of curbing or anything like that. So that's what I was taking that from, but obviously we can do whatever we'd like to do there. With the caveat that we want to talk with the school, and I'll just remind the council, which is kind of interesting that this came up so high. I thought it was interesting, came up so high on the public surveys, because when we talked with the school board, this was not one of the higher priority projects that the city council and the school district came up with. In fact, I think we said, let's just do all these other improvements first, and we'll see how this here kind of goes. And we kind of put this on the back burner. And then again, it ranked really, really high when we went out to the public recent ARPA Funds survey. So I do think before we did anything here, if it was going to be anything different than what's in that plan, and even if that, we should go back to the school, at least give them a heads up and give them an opportunity to give some feedback on that.
Do you think that that might be because we put out for the ARPA fund survey that the public doesn't see all the options and all the different things in context? Okay, not privy to the conversation that we had with the school district.
I think they definitely were not privy to the conversation the council and the school district had together. I think that and go back at the number of people that have watched that.
Sure.
Heard that or read the minute, right? That's probably pretty low. Yeah, maybe in the tens, maybe.
One wasn't
Participants. Yeah, what's that?
I thought that one wasn't live streamed.
Yeah, I don't think it was. The school district hosted it, so, fairly minimal. It was one of the, when we did the traffic and school circulation study, it did rank there. I mean, it was one of like the top 4 areas that were selected. It was the top 4 areas that they looked at. It was just when we looked at all of those top 4 priorities, it was maybe number 4, right? It was kind of lower on those 4. It was much more about 16th Street and Applegate and 19th and Main and 19th Street. And this was kind of that 4th area of concern. It just, but again, for the low cost, to me, it seemed like it was worthy of at least taking a look at, because we can make a pretty quick impact for not a lot of dollars, which really is really attractive. In its public cases.
Dr. Cocker?
I understand why it was high, because everybody that drives by there knows that's a very, very dangerous spot, and we can't put a price on the children and their safety. Can the school board split the cost with us? I mean, it was their decision to put the pickup spot on 19th Street. If they had moved it and they have the ability to do that, then it wouldn't even be an issue. So
Can I would ask?
yeah, I know they're being hit right now with a lot of things, but I think that would be a reasonable ask, is that we split the cost.
Yeah. Yeah, we can ask. I think what. I don't want to give the school board too much ammunition, but I think what we'll hear from them is we're giving you a bunch of land for 16th Street.
Okay,
You want some money for this,
sure.
and we still feel like the city's got some responsibility for the cross-country fields and the forest there, and you've offered to help, but we've really not seen any dollar numbers there yet. So I think the school district may have a little bit of a hard time of jumping on board with helping out on something like this. And honestly, it's a fairly small expense project as well, so this may not be a good one to partner with them on. 3,400. It may not be a great project to ask them to partner with us on, just because the dollar amount's so low. Maybe wait for a bigger.
Yeah.
Collaboration there.
Do you think we should go through all the projects so we can talk about all of them rather than?
Sure. Councilman Jordan had a question. So that's that project, and again, we can come back to it. The next one was the play equipment, and yes, I had a little bit of fun with this one. Mostly I just don't think that council and most people generally don't know what playground equipment costs. And so I try to give some examples of some climbing type equipment or more comprehensive, and you can see the price ranges there on things that kids would climb up on and hang from and slide down. So there's some pricing there, some swings, tire swing, kind of group swings, what those prices would be. Some, again, smaller climbing type stuff. And I included the dinosaur stuff just to give an example that there are kind of these themes in playground equipment. And so if the council did want to go this route, my encouragement, I think I say it's a statement, my encouragement would be that you involve the park board or let the park board really take the lead on this and do some public outreach, put some proposals together. Do we want to have like a dinosaur type theme park with boulders and rocks and logs and dinosaur bones and sand pits that you can dig down and find the skeletons, all kinds of stuff? That'd be one theme. Or do you want to have more like a futuristic theme park, right? With more whimsical type things and different designs. So we don't need to have that discussion tonight. I just wanted to give an example, that any of these companies make playground equipment, and there's literally dozens of these different companies, maybe a dozen, but there's lots of different places that you can go for playground equipment. I literally went to one manufacturer's website just to be consistent with their pricing and the type of things that they have. So this is just a sample on what those things would cost. I do make an argument in the bottom of page 2. We've got funding for this, right? The city council made a decision several years ago that we needed to start replacing some of our outdated equipment, and we started putting money into land building equipment, into a playground equipment fund to do just this very thing, to replace old and outdated and worn out equipment. We currently have $122,000 in there. We're anticipate this budget year. We anticipate that next year we would put another $27,000 into that. So that, July 1st of 2024, we'll have $150,000 in there for playground equipment replacement. Which kind of begs the question, do we use ARPA funds in addition to that? Do we use ARPA funds for something else and use the playground equipment fund for playground equipment? So I'm just putting it out there. And again, one of the arguments that's kind of embedded in here is with the ARPA funds, we're looking for things that aren't funded other ways, right? Like, let's find things that we don't have another funding source for and use these ARPA funds for these one-time expense type projects. So this is one I feel pretty strongly that it's an important thing, but it could probably wait till July 1st, and we could probably use our park equipment fund for that. If there's things in addition to this we want to do with the ARPA funds, that's a different discussion. But I think the timing of get the park board involved, give them a year, tell the park board, hey, in a year, you're gonna have $150,000 to do the park equipment at Shelter 2 and maybe some park equipment up at Triangle Park, which is high on the park master plan list of projects and parks that need some new improvement. And let them go to work, right? And come back to you for approvals on things. So I kind of make a case here that I think there's funding outside of ARPA funds. A pretty good amount of work. And if we can't do everything in 1 year, definitely over the years, if we're going to continue to put $27,000 towards equipment, you can see that buys you quite a bit of equipment every single year. And this is just purchases, not installation. We'd have some installation and shipping costs and things too. So questions on that?
But
The $122,760, that is allocated just for, it's not for other things besides just playground. So it will be there when next year, not going to be whittled away on other things.
For playground equipment, does that include exercise equipment or is that something separate? Because they are similar at least, but funding wise, or do they come from the same place?
Yeah, I would include it in the same thing. So the exercise equipment at City Park, if we want to replace that, that would here as well. I did include, I mean, I think it's needed personally. It did get included in the ARPA fund list and it actually ranked kind of mid-tier. It wasn't the lowest.
I know.
bathrooms, that comes out of the same kind of money, but
No, bathrooms would be. No, bathrooms is a much larger kind of capital expense that
Okay.
I wouldn't pull out of playground equipment. I think we'd be very more intentional about putting money through.
And does the park committee have little children? Have they actually played on a playground recently? I mean, I would just caution, I look at this and there's some with my grandchildren, there's no way I would use them, but some of them have been tried and true. So,
Yeah, my encouragement would be that park board would do both public and, public engagement and hear from the public, not just go off of their own individual experiences, but that'd be part of it. And honestly, I should know this better, but Kelsey's taken over the park board staffing that, so I'm not overly familiar with the current makeup there and like how many children each of them have or anything, but again, they're gonna run point on doing the public engagement portion here.
And in addition to that, if I may say, lots of schools in Corvallis and in Albany have been replacing their playground equipment. And so because I grandkids I bring in, and so we visit a lot of different schools because they're actually better than the parks in a lot of places. And so that would be another recommendation to check out the school equipment.
Just a request that to pass on to the park advisory board and to Chelsea to maybe send out when surveys happen at some point. To send them to the schools to get directly to hear from the children.
So the second half of this was is page 3, the playground, rubber playground surfacing. So this was not necessarily a specific item that was identified in the survey or talked about ahead of time, but it was a subject of interest for the council at the last meeting. Did quite a bit of work on this. I mean, short of getting specific bids for the project, I didn't want to mislead anyone, but did get some really good numbers and talking to some of these contractors on their price, kind of average price per square foot. And then you price it out and they include in there their travel and their overhead and all that stuff. So these were pretty good numbers that we're using. In fact, they're kind of that mid to upper. So the 11 to 18 or excuse me, the $8 to $11 per square foot was where they were at the very, very high end. They were like 18, but they're like, that's going to be rare cases, a foot deep. So they felt very comfortable with me using that $11 average per square foot. And I said it could be as low as 8, just depending on where you're at and all that stuff. So Cochrane Park, I just did some rough calculations of what it would cost to do that park as a, for instance, and again, at $8, you're looking at $27,000. If we're at $11 a square foot, which is close to the average, you're talking $37,400 to do Cochrane Park. That's up and above what's in the current budget for that park, so that would require action by the council to allocate additional funds or allocate these ARPA funds towards that project. We did allocate all of the ARPA funds into this year's budget, so we're not changing the budget at all. We're just saying we're gonna take those ARPA funds, we're gonna put it towards this project. We would need to do some type of a change order with the current contractor that has that project. That's, you know, that project's already underway. But this would be something they would sub out anyway, so not a big deal. We could still take action if that's something the council is really interested in doing. We just need to know sooner than later, like tonight or a few weeks. We need to know pretty quick if that's something we want to do.
Would that also be possible to come out of this pot of funding? or no?
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely.
Question. What's in the plan right now to be installed at Cochrane?
Engineered chips, same as at City Park.
Gotcha. And if we don't do that, there's gonna be some savings, but I imagine it's pretty marginal or.
The engineered chips are fairly expensive. I don't know the exact price on that, but I mean, if I had to guess, I'm thinking that's probably a $2,000-3,000 worth of chips there. So, I mean, not enough to offset.
No, but at least it
But
would
yeah, there's.
mitigate. Thanks.
I think I put in as far as last, I mean, these say up to 15 years and talking, it's like, yeah. You're gonna have stuff. I mean, once you get a little thick in this stuff, the kids start digging at it and everything else. So there's still gonna be maintenance on these. But at that 15-year mark is typically when you're gonna tear out and replace. During that 15-year time, you're still gonna do some patching, you're still gonna do some work and stuff, some maintenance on it. But it should last overall, the full depth, everything else should last that 15 years in our climate is what I'm being told. By one manufacturer specifically, the contractor that does this work and works with the manufacturer. So they felt comfortable with that 15 years. Noting there's still gonna be some kind of maintenance during that time period, but so if you do the math, but you're adding pretty.
I love the idea of the rubber playground surfacing. I've been at parks with it and it's wonderful, but this bid is just for the Cochrane Park, not the Park 2 at the city park.
Right,
And that would be significantly more because it's a larger space, I'm guessing.
it's a larger space currently. But again, if the older playground equipment's coming out, we can kind of redefine that area as well, so. Yeah. I mean, I could run some if we're interested in shelter 2 park area. I could run some estimates of how many square foot I think that would be compared to the Cochrane one. I'm thinking it's at least double. It's probably more like triple, just size wise. There's quite a bit more space back there.
And you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation about other funding sources for this, the Cochrane Park. Are there other funding sources available that might cover this tiling?
Cochrane Park, we're able to use some SDC funds because it's a new park and we're adding 2. Shelter 2, we can't use this park SDCs because it's essentially just replacement. It's an existing park. We're not adding park space, etc. So this is just general fund dollars. So it's money that comes in general fund that the city staff and the city council have been allocating for parks. And then we're specifically saying we're going to put this into landfill equipment for park equipment replacement, but it's all just general tax dollars coming into the general fund. Cochrane, again, like I said, a little bit of the SDCs, any new park that gets developed. You know, if we wanted to look at all new parks, we're going to put the surfacing in, then we could put SDCs towards that, which substantially helps offset those costs. But short of that, yeah, you're looking at your general fund, or you're looking at any type of grants that we would get for the parks.
So using SDCs for Cochrane, how would that work and what would be the benefit of that?
We're using SDCs for Cochrane.
So could we do additional SDCs for the rubber tiles?
Honestly, I'd need to look at our capital improvement plan and see what our balance for park SDCs is right now, and what's projected to be. I can pull that up on a break.
Okay, that'd be nice to know. Thank you.
Can you, if we're installing this new equipment at shelter 2, it makes sense to do the surface at the same time, but in the event that we can do that, if like 3 years from now, we decide the rubber's working great, we want to go back and put it in there, can you go back and retrofit with that even after the equipment's installed?
Put the equipment in now, put bark chips and then come back later and do, yeah, absolutely.
Next.
Next one is backup power for the water supply. I focused primarily on the Starlight Summit pump station. I did not take into consideration both of them, even though that's been talked about as kind of doing both. We are pretty actively working on funding for both of those, but the case for hardening the current reservoir for earthquakes gives that one a little bit more of an up and an edge for getting some grant money, and we can take care of these upgrades for that at that time. And so I kind of separated those two out. The focus really has been on the power supply for Starlight Summit. I add a little bit more information in that it hasn't come out in the past, and so both apologize and more specifically come out earlier. And try not to dilute it too much, but there is a line item, it's a specific project in the water master plan that calls for an upgrade of that entire system. The expectation has always been that would happen as more development took place, but the new phase 3 would come in and that developer would be required to put additional pumps in, pumps that can provide fire flow, be a repetitive system or a redundant system. So if one pump went out, you'd still have another pump that could work. We'd have backup power there. And so, you know, that project, I think I put just under $1 million, 900 and the number right in front of me, $935,000. So that's what's anticipated and what's needed up there, but that's what's going to be needed to support all of phase 3, right? That's not necessarily what's needed to support phase 1. Right now for phase 1, backup power would be necessary, and really, I'm not a statistician, but you've got at least as likelihood chance potentially of that. As far as fire suppression goes, you've only got one pump right now that can provide fire flow. The other two pumps will do domestic, but they're not going to provide enough water for fire flows. You've got one pump. So statistically, is that one pump going to be there when you need it to be there? Are you going to have electricity when you need to be there? I don't know which is more likely to go out, the power or the pump, but I'm just saying we don't have a redundant system in either situation, or electricity or the one pump that can provide fire flow. So, you know, if I were to do a minimal upgrade up there, I know we've got in our capital plan for the $120,000 for the generator, that will take care of one thing, but really a second pump that can provide fire flow would also be necessary. If I had a crystal ball that we talked about with Ryan earlier, if I knew that phase 3 wasn't going to be developed in the next 20 years, I would look for the city to put money in to do at least a second pump to give us some redundancy there and the backup power generator. And that I would say could then last us for the next 20 years, however long it needs to last us. Full build out of phase 3 is going to require additional pumps, a new pump house to house everything, schematics, connection to SCADA. That's where we just had a $5,000 project instead of $120,000. So all of that to confuse and muddy the water a little bit. I think the $120,000 project to just add power would help, but it's really not going to give you that much more guarantee. I guess it cuts your odds in half, right? I'm trying to, again, play statistician here. You're eliminating one of those concerns, which is a lack of power, but we're not addressing the other concern, which is a lack of additional pumps or backup pump. The last caveat I'll throw in here to muddy it is, again, we're looking at where the water sources are coming from. This project is very much eligible for water funds. The reason it's not been paid for with water funds in the past is because, again, we've kind of held our breath thinking development was going to come in and let the developer pay for it rather than one with residents that are paying water bills. But the council has prioritized this project. It's in our strategic plan. And so if we want to move forward with that project, I'm comfortable with it. But I would still argue that we could use water funds for this project as opposed to using ARPA funds for it, which is water funds we won't have on other places. So, you know, water funds aren't unlimited. We actually raised water rates this year because we saw that our balances were dropping down a little bit. And so I don't want to give the impression that we'll just raise water rates to do all the projects. But $120,000 is a pretty relatively small number for as large as the water fund is. And it is something we could prioritize and do. And I said, we are continuing to look for a grant that would fit there. We just haven't found a great fit for that grant yet. And I know Councilor Kazi's done quite a bit of work in looking for the perfect grant, and that's not really there. Any grant we apply for would be a little bit of a stretch to try to fit into their program. But we do think that there could still be something out there, so. That really muddied the water. Happy to answer your questions or try to clarify that.
I did talk to some of the firefighters about this issue because I care about it. And they said they carry a significant amount of water on their trucks, that should not be the end all concern for what we're trying to do. So I think keeping the electricity on is the important thing, the generator, and the water would be great, but they said they carry so much with them that it's not as big a deal as I was trying to do.
Yeah, so if we went forward with this and we invested in the generator, I'm wondering that, I'm assuming that would be incorporated in the final build out. We wouldn't have to, it's not a, oh, we'll use this for now and then we'll scrap that and go in with other stuff at the end.
I don't know how to answer that. And I honestly don't, because I don't know if the $120,000 number that got put into the capital improvement plan was for a generator sufficient to back up the 3 pumps that are there now, 1 for fire suppression, 2 for domestic. Or if it was sized out to do just eventually 6 pumps are going to be there, right? At least 3 that can do the fire, and then 3 additional for backup as needed, or for domestic, and then the backup power. So I honestly don't know. I don't know. If we can't use it there, we find something, we're not gonna throw it away, right? So worst case scenario, we surplus it and we sell it and try to make some money back on it, but I just don't know the answer to that. But I can find out.
And it depends on how long it takes you before you get to build out. So in 40 years, that generator's probably gonna be, something needs to be replaced.
Sure. Yeah, no, I was thinking more like in the next 5 or 10 years that it just doesn't make sense to spend the 120,000 and then 3 years from now, let's pitch that and build this whole new thing.
One other concept that's on that, I'm going to Council Kazi. I don't think I mentioned here is no matter what we do up there, because it's water fund, my recommendation would be that we'd set up a reimbursement district there. So that if phase 3 does build out, they would need to pay the city back for some of the improvements that we made that are now supporting that development, right? And so when we can do that, regardless of how we fund it, ARPA funds or water funds, I think no matter what we do, we'd work to set up that reimbursement district specifically to capture future development of phase 3.
I just wanted to share some information regarding the individual who developed, one of the individuals who developed Starlight and owns the property up there. He does have some personal issues, which will likely prevent him from developing phase 3, so the property would have to be resold to someone else who would be willing to develop it. And he is now selling his lots, his remaining lots. I think there's only 2 or 3, but he's selling them without building on them, which is an indication of the challenges with this situation, because that means that he is not recovering the cost of the infrastructure on those lots. So we've been here 5 years now, and we've seen no indication whatsoever that phase 3 is going to move forward. With interest rates what they are today, and it's particularly attractive. And there are 3 homes for sale out there right now, none of which are moving particularly quickly.
On that page, the last one, I have a committee deal on it, but 15 street lighting. So this was in the survey, and the one that I was originally submitting was the one of 4 projects to do, and the council funded the 3, and then this $160,000 for the street lighting is what kind of started the whole process of are there other things that we could fund. Did I get in here? I think we added a line at the bottom there, talking to Mike a little bit about funding sources for the street lighting. He did remind it is within their growth boundary, so we could use urban, or excuse me, it's within the urban renewal district, so we could use urban renewal funds for this project. Right now, those urban renewal funds are all pointed at the streetscapes project, and we've committed those to the streetscape project. This is not part of the streetscape project because it's 13th Street and not along Main. So we'd kind of be pulling from a previously committed to funding source to fund this one in hopes that we wouldn't use all the contingency or all the money that we've dedicated towards streetscape. So I'm not overly comfortable of going that route, but I just put it on there to say it is an option, and maybe it wouldn't happen now. But if we didn't fund this project now with like the ARPA funds, after the streetscape project was complete, if we didn't use all that contingency, all the money we thought we could arm wrestle ODOT for it and potentially get some of that money back, and we could then use that money within the urban renewal area, which would include North 13th Street. So it may just be a project that doesn't happen now while the streetscape project's happening. It could come in afterwards if there's money left over from streetscape. So that is a potential funding source, and I want to put that out there. But otherwise, again, we don't, collect a sidewalk fee. We don't collect a street light fee per se. The street fee that we do is really for chip seals and crack seals, and it's really for more maintenance on existing streets, not a large project like this. So it does stand to me a little bit unique in that it is challenging to fund that project. It's really, to me, just a matter of, do we value the aesthetic ness of that project, and 13th Street being what it is, moving towards having it be Festival Street and the other things that we've done there in the last several years. Is it worth spending the money on that project at the expense of not being able to do the other things with the project or the funds that we'd like to do? So have to answer specific questions on the street lighting itself.
And so would street lighting be eligible for like tourism funds?
We could use tourism funds. Yeah, we get $5,000 a year from the county now, and half of that we do for the grant program, and half of it we give for ourselves to fund a tourist. So that's $250,000 or $500.
One light every 3 years?
Yeah. Every
5 years.
But we did just enact our transit lodging tax. If you'll remember at the January meeting, or maybe it was February meeting, we mentioned that we hadn't been, the hotel hadn't been, they didn't feel like they'd been noticed. They got noticed, but they hadn't been charging their customers the 9%, and so they didn't have it at the end of the first quarter's bill when they came due. So we had that discussion. When I talked to Department of Revenue and our rep there, I said, well, how much money are we talking about? Is this a couple $100? Is it $30,000? I mean, what are we talking about? And what she said was, with your 9%, based on their previous year's sales or what they'd submitted to them, she did some back calculation. She said, you're probably looking first quarter about $6,000 for January, February, March. So that was her best estimate, was about 6,000. So, if you assumed about the same vacancy rate over an entire year and did that out, you're talking, $24,000 from the hotel. We did not budget to spend any transit lodging tax dollars from the TLT tax. We did put in the $5,000 to spend that we knew we were getting from the county, but we did not anticipate spending any money from the transit lodging tax revenue that we're going to be receiving now 3/4 of the year for. We wanted to see what that revenue is going to look like first, and then next year in the budget we can look at expenses there. But again, that'd be $24,000 plus the $5,000 that we're getting from the county, divided by 2. Half that's going to the grant program, and the other half's going to the city, or staying with the city for us to use internally for our own.
These other 2 projects.
Okay, these ones just came in timely, and again, these weren't in the survey. These are just things that have happened since we released the survey or in discussions. Our current reader board on Applegate Street, I was a little bit friendly here. It's on its way out. We're having problems with it. The temperature gauge isn't working anymore. We're just starting to have some kind of some problems. The software is not supported. We've got one laptop in City Hall that can connect to it. It's the only laptop, and so we shared it. So there's just some issues with that. It's just aging out. The fire station, Chief Ferguson reached out a couple months ago and said that they were interested in putting a new reader board up on their property that could hit all of the westbound traffic. And want to know if we want to partner with them and maybe do two and go in together. And I said at the time, we don't really have it. We could look at maybe some ARPA funding. He's like, no. And they just proceeded. So they got a grant to do one, to do theirs. And so again, I just thought I'd throw it out there that, you know, since the last survey and since I talked to Chief Ferguson, I've been informed that ours is really starting to get long in the tooth and probably needs to be replaced. So I just throw that out there. $30,000 to $40,000 for both signs. They've already got the grant for theirs, so we're talking in that probably $15,000 to $20,000 range to replace our sign here. Technology's come a long way. We can remote access now, so Ruth doesn't have to go out there with the umbrella and hardwire and everything. And we'd be able to do it from here. It's going to look a little bit nicer depending on which one we get. So there'd be some time savings and just some efficiencies on getting a new reader board sign. So that's just throw that out there as another need that if we don't do it with ARPA funds, we should probably look at some point in the future that we probably need to pull some funds from somewhere to pay for that.
Grant funds available for that sort of thing.
There are. It's a small dollar amount. I mean, maybe parks, maybe. Yeah, I said there are, and now I'm like, I don't know where I would look actually for grants for something like that.
Not tourism. Okay. So
Tourism would work. We could use tourism dollars for it. Yeah, so the same tourism dollars could go towards it. Maybe some, you know, there's regional tourism dollars, which are very competitive and they're not very big, but you know, maybe something like that. It's not a bad project for something to apply for maybe with the tribes. They're pretty generous and this is a very public facing and dollar amount. That might be a good match where we could get some of that. From that, even Benton County Foundation, maybe Fulham Community Foundation would pitch on something like that. The last time we did this, I think it was the fire district and the Frolic and Rodeo pitched in and paid a pretty substantial amount towards that. So we may find that partnership as well. We could tap the Frolic or, you know, maybe the school district have some
The
money.
school district did contribute originally.
Did they originally to the first one? Yeah.
School district, the Frolic, the fire department and the city.
And
all
okay.
For funds to do that. I would add that one advantage that we have now that we didn't have originally is that the electricity is already run to that location. So originally we had an electricity to it.
And I'm just gonna add briefly that. By mentioning the tribes, you're not actually getting money from the tribe, you're getting money from the tribal foundation that's run by the casino that's required, that they're required by law to have. To give back money to the state of Oregon's residents. So you're not actually getting the actual tribe.
Right, thank you.
That would be
From the foundation.
Yeah.
Which has been very generous to Philomath and many other organizations in the past, so. There's a history there. Alas,
Chris mentioned that we're one laptop away from that sign being done. That sign is a parallel port. And finding a way to connect it to an existing laptop right now is the challenge. Okay. And I literally had to order a cable from Amazon, and you know how they have little screws on the side? Gary had to shave those screws off of that cable connection in order to be able to move it, because the sign does not have the screw ins.
Right.
And there's only one USB port that it will actually respond to.
we'll make it happen, but. The last project, paper here recently, very recently, the trees that had to come down at Downey Forest, which is where the cross-country course has existed for years. As I put in there, and it's been in the paper, I mean, I attended that meeting with Susan Halliday and Rick Wells and essentially just said, we've got some equipment, we've got a dump truck, we got an excavator, and if you need help with equipment, we've got it. Let me know what the plan is, let me know what the expenses are, I'll take it to the council, see what we can do to help out. In no way, in fact, I was pretty mad at the city, I don't believe is responsible for the trees falling down in Downing Forest. There were a lot of things that could have and probably did contribute to that. one of which likely could have been the city's project that went in on Chapel Drive, but I think and the school district wasn't asking for a blank check, and I did not give them a blank check. I said, we're here to help. Let us know what the plan is, let us know where we're headed, and I can bring that back to the council. So I'm putting that on here. I put some dollar figures in here. Those are pretty preliminary, and I just, again, I don't think that the school district's looking for $500,000 to fix this. I think they're looking for what help the city can give, more as a show that we are partnering with them on this and recognize the value that forest has. It's a big sporting meet, 9+ schools that come to Philomath for that, and so they're very concerned about getting that up and going and to a spot where we can still have that invitational, the Merriman Invitational, and getting that done. So it's a big thing. And again, if we could put some ARPA funds there or other funds that the city council has at its disposal within the city council department budget, that'd be, I think, more than appropriate and very appreciated by the school district. So I threw that one on there as well.
Got it. Okay, so there we have a summary of all the different projects. Potential sources of funding for them.
Yeah, information.
Okay,
I'd like to move that the council select the backup power supply in the primary school pickup area to be funded by the ARPA funds.
we have a motion made by Councilor.
I'll second it.
You can make a motion.
I just did math. I would like to see the water, Clements, the rubber playground, and $2,000 to the cross country, and that puts us, I believe, at $160 and $400. So maybe the $400 comes from our.
You can those by which ones were those?
Summarize those again.
The Starlight Village generator, thank you, and the Clemens safety and the rubber playground. And $2,000 for cross country.
But if we can use SDCs for the rubber tiles, could we not do the SDCs? The Cochrane Veteran Memorial Park, if I understood correctly, being as a new park, we could possibly use SDCs, unless I misunderstood.
When I thought they said it was already allocated.
Point of clarification. How much is this, is it supposed to be again, 100, is it not 120, 160,000?
You're correct that there's other sources of funds that could be used for those pots of funding that Chris went over, including SDCs for Cochrane, and for the other parks, we could use the parks funds that are already allocated for those. But if you want to,
Well, I would just say that the 122 or 150,000 that we'll have next July 1st will not be enough to pay for the rubber bottom and very many play structures. I think it would be. I just think that would be too tight.
Yeah. For anything related to parks, I really think that it's important that we just kick that over to the Parks Committee and let them go to us or take it, give us weigh in, come back to us with something more specific. I don't really feel, personally, I don't feel like we can just throw a blank check at that or give them a dollar amount and run with it right now. I just don't feel like I have that information.
And I feel if we have SDCs, if we have adequate SDCs for the new park, I'm very comfortable in using the SDCs for the.
Order. Sorry, what is the motion to amend?
There's not a motion to amend right now.
Well, she was.
Well, I have.
Yeah, there is.
Councilor Coffey and Nielsen have a motion?
Yes, and Councilor Crocker made a motion to amend, and then discussion started to happen, so I'm trying to
Trying to
clarify.
clarify. Do you want to clarify your motion and then we have a second answer?
So I was giving 2 more options to take us to the 160,000, so we would be spending $1. And that's why I wanted to add some more things, because otherwise we're not spending the whole amount.
Your motion to amend?
Fine,
Yes.
I would amend that we add the water and Clemens, as she mentioned. I said also the rubber playground and the cross-country $2,000 help to rebuild the cross-country. course.
Add the rubber park surface, playground surface, and 2,000 towards the cross country. To the two projects that
Yes,
were in the original motion.
for a total of 160,000.
You said rubber tiles, yes, that's how that works out too. That works out that way, yeah.
And these were the tiles for Cochrane or for City.
The bid in here is for Cotton.
So do we have a motion to amend? Do we have a second on that? Second by Council Lehman.
And I have a motion to amend it to only the primary school, so we could do it one at a time.
So, well, I'm sorry, we use.
My motion to amend is just to take it back to basics and to, my motion is that we fund the primary school pickup area improvements only. And then we go on with other projects. Individually, as opposed to,
You can do that as a motion to amend, or you can do it as a motion, you can ask to divide the question.
I would like to
Motion
divide the
has two
question then,
pieces
please.
of it. One.
Thank you.
Second. I agree.
Okay. So. First thing we're going to do is to vote on one motion to amend. And then we can vote on the other motion to amend. And then we can ask some clarifying questions. So. First of all, we have Council Andrade's motion to amend. Right? That's the most logical.
Wasn't Council Crocker's motion.
Hers is a motion to amend, her motion to amend.
But her motion to amend has not been voted on.
No,
So it hasn't been. So it's not effective. There's nothing to amend until it's, if the body approves it, then.
can we go back to hers?
So you should go Crocker's and then Andrade's in that order.
Got it. So further discussion of Councilor Crocker's motion to amend. Councilor Lehman.
I would like to try the rubber in one of our parks so that we can get an idea of if it's appropriate and adequate for use in our other parks. And I think that using the ARPA funds is very appropriate for that rather than using the park funds, because the park funds are, if they're not already dedicated, they're accounted for in the big scheme of things, and maybe the rubber tiles or the cord rubber is not. And so that's why I feel like we should use the ARPA funds for the rubber. And I also think that we need to do something to help the school district, because while I don't feel we're culpable for that, I feel like there's a public perception that we are culpable for it. And so we need to do something outward facing that shows that we're the team on the cross-country team.
I just get clarification on the dollar figures that you used in your
120 for the power generation, 3,400 for Clemens. Oh, I put 35,000 for the playground rubber tiles and 2,000 for the cross country.
Councilor Causey, your hand up?
I believe, I agree that it is worthwhile trying out rubber surface on one of our parks, but I think if we have SDC funds to pay for it, we should use those funds. They're restricted as to what we can use them for, and the ARPA funds have a number of other opportunities. So if we have SDC funds available for those, I would use those.
Thank you. Councilor Andrade.
Thank you, Councilor Lehman. I agree with what you said. And Councilor Causey, I appreciate the use, wanting to use SDC funds. But we also have the Mill Pond Park that will be a new park. And so I suspect that there'll be a lot of funds that will need to go into that park. And I would imagine that most of those SDCs would be beneficial for that part. And so I don't have an issue using these ARPA funds for the rubber matting for the Cochrane Park, especially since it is such a small area.
And I'll just mention, getting to Councilor Kazi's comment, general funds and ARPA funds can be used for anything at all. And the SEC funds have to be, are very limited what they can be applied to. And so I think it makes, for me, it makes sense to utilize the SEC funds for anything we can, that's an eligible expense. And then to utilize the general funds or the ARPA funds as something above and beyond. That's just, but can you speak to the, is Councilor Andrade's assumption correct that the city will be installing a bunch of playground infrastructure in that Mill Pond Crossing Park?
So the development is gonna pay for the park. We did estimate within the budget that the city would have, or we budgeted for about $20,000 worth of items up and beyond what the developer was responsible for and agreed to install, but the city wanted to have a little bit of money there. Say for like some inclusive playground or something that wasn't in the agreed list of things that the developer is going to provide, but that developer is paying for the sports court, the parking, the bathroom, so the majority of the park is paying for the development. Less about $20,000 that the city wanted to have there, but we haven't had any discussion about what is going to be, what we're going to spend that $20,000 on. We just put it in the budget. That would be SDC funds would be. I did pull the capital improvement plan real quick, but it doesn't give me a balance for our expected balance of park SDCs. So I'm looking at other things.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments on Councilor Crocker's amendment? Motion to amend.
Can you clarify what Jessica's proposal was before I vote on hers? I want to be clear on what Jessica's requesting before I vote on.
I don't really understand it myself.
It would be to divide it so that you're not voting
A lump.
on a lump, you're voting on each project.
I understand. Thank you.
So any further discussion of Councilor Crocker's motion to amend? All in favor of moving forward with Councilor Crocker's motion to amend, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All opposed, please raise your hand and say aye. Or nay? Nay. So in a tie, to clarify, motion passed. So now we have the original motion on the table, and can you just repeat what that motion is?
This is on Councilor,
Kazi's, yeah. Yep.
The city select the backup power supply on the primary school pickup area.
Yes, it is.
And so further discussion or motions to amend there?
Councilor Andrade had a motion to amend or to divide the question.
Oh, got it. That's the one. Okay. So,
So second.
yeah, do we have a motion?
You did, that's right, yeah. It was a while ago.
That's to divide the projects. And then we, okay. So any further discussion on that?
That's to divide so we can vote individually on specific things. Is that what I'm understanding? Okay.
So all in favor of dividing?
That implies we would consider each project individual.
Or anything else you might consider, yeah.
And your motion was to consider the school improvement primary first.
I was just dividing the question, is
Okay.
all that matters to me.
That's fine. Okay, thanks. All in favor, please use your hand and say aye. Okay, and all opposed? So we have the motion carries, the motion to amend carries 5-1. Okay. So,
You just take that one.
and then, well, we have opportunity for further discussion at this point.
Sure.
I will mention that I'm a big advocate for the 13th Street lighting. I think that it's really important that we do that project. And there's not a lot of other sources of funding that will allow us to do so in a timely manner. And I think it's really imperative or important that we utilize the contractors that we have to save costs while we're doing this other larger streetscapes project. So I'm a big advocate for us putting the money behind that project, which we've had planned for a long time. And I think not doing it right now would not be a great thing for the city, because I think we probably wouldn't get to it for another decade. We don't do it now. So anyway, I guess I'll leave it at that for now. Depending on what happens here, I can,
Was that a motion?
no.
Yeah, yours is cool. So we divided those two questions. You can think of them as having had a motion for each piece and a second for each of those pieces, and you're just gonna vote on those separately, and then whatever comes from that, then you can keep on going with other projects or other things, but that's really what's probably on the table.
Okay. So then to clarify my interpretation, so we're going to then discuss, let's talk about the primary school pickup area first. So on the primary school pickup area, we have a cost estimate of $3,400 for that particular project. Any further discussion on that particular project?
I'll just add at this dollar amount. I don't think we need to reach out to the school. I mean, I would give them a heads up of here's what we're gonna do, but it would be limited to what we're doing. Counselor Cosme comments to do something more that would cost more. But the 3,400 would be. And I don't want to mislead, it doesn't include these little raised bubbles there. It would just be for the stick. So this isn't, now that I'm looking at it and attention there. It would just be for the poles. They'd be bolted into the ground. So essentially it'd be the poles without I didn't notice that those little raised, the rubber big bumper things were in there. So I apologize for the misleading photo there. It would just be for the stand-up white columns. And we would let the school district know that we were going to do that, and then we would have Public Works install them, order them and install.
Any further discussion on that? All in favor of pushing that forward, please raise your hand and say aye. Okay, motion carries unanimously on that. And so now we have talking about the backup power for the water. I'll put this in.
Yeah, it seems like this has been an issue for a while, and we've been looking for ways to fund it, or not looking, but paying attention to ways to fund it, and we haven't really found a good solution for that. It's a safety issue. Even if you only look at the domestic use, there's potential for bad things to get into the water supply and have a negative impact on our citizens there. So that's why I would support this project at the expense of other projects like the streetlights.
And I concur. I think this is a health and safety issue for the well-being of the citizens that live there in our city limits. I think we need to step up and provide a safe, consistent water source for them.
And I'll just add that to me, this like there's any reason we can't move forward that project using existing city funds that are already in the water development funds. Or Chris, we have funds available for.
We've got, outside of what we've budgeted for the treatment plant and the reservoir, we've got $125,000 contingency just for the water fund alone. So that if this is an important project and we want to fund it, we could do it this year with $125,000 contingency. We move into the fund for the end of the budget for this year, and we spend that money. That's just money that doesn't carry over into next year's beginning fund balance in the water fund. But again, that budget hasn't been shown yet. We did just increase water rates this year, so we do anticipate seeing more revenue come in next year. So that is an option.
Yeah, a couple of points. When you talked earlier about a lack of a backup pump. I don't know what the lifespan on those pumps are, but that pump station is not all that old. I would expect that it should be pretty reliable for a few years. But if you want to address that issue and we have the money available, perhaps we should do both. both the generator and a backup. But I think the generator is imperative, and I know you all know how I feel about this. I apologize because I know I can be sort of righteous at times. But I think the safety of our citizens is our top priority. And I had to ask myself on August 10th if I would want to be on the Maui County Council. How would you feel? A failure of infrastructure, a failure of warnings, and a failure of an adequate fire force. There are 115 confirmed dead so far. 388 are unaccounted for. How many of you have been to Lahaina? What a beautiful little town. What a modest little town. I know there's always a tendency to think that couldn't happen here. But there was a thunderstorm last Friday that started 6 fires in Benton County. All of them were west of us. Fortunately, they were all contained. But had there been high winds, it could have been disastrous. And on our hillside, the hill above our house, there are probably 20 or 30 mile-an-hour winds every night. So to me, these other things are good but superfluous. And we're pretty good, and our staff is pretty good at finding money to get things done. So to me, this is imperative. I don't want anyone in this town to lose their life in a fire. Granted, our power poles are in pretty good shape. I actually drove around and looked at all of them today. There's quite a few. They look to be pretty straight, pretty solid. And I don't think we have any uninsulated wires, but I don't know for sure. Anyway, I don't see how we cannot make this choice and get this done.
I agree that it is very important that we keep the safety of our community top of mind. That said, I agree with Mayor Jones that we have other funding for this. On top of it, with ARPA funds, my takeaway is that it's supposed to be more of a way to kind of transform community building. I feel like the spirit of the funds would be better suited for something that isn't necessarily safety. Oh, I mean, we're still using it for safety reasons for the primary school project, but anyway, the point being, I feel like since we have other funding for this, that we should put the majority of the funds towards community building, as was my understanding, the original intention of funds.
It seems to me that this has been a problem for a long time, and if we had other funding, it should be done by now. So I've heard talk of other funding, but I've not seen any action towards it. I would love to be funding this.
You only get onto the capital improvement project when
This last year.
This year.
yeah, so we haven't had it on the capital improvement plan yet.
That would be.
Yes.
We're talking about a backup generator. How much is a backup pump? We talked about adding have a timeline to adding a backup pump. How much is a backup pump for that area?
I don't know. Water master plans I'm referencing kind of groups that whole $1 amount. So the engineer, Chris Brigado, that wrote the water master plan, probably has those numbers, but it's not in the water master plan broken out.
So secondary question, could the 120 ARPA fund, well, 124 from the ARPA fund be used for the generator, and then other water funds be used for a backup pump?
But the pump would be used for what?
That's the fire suppression, is it not?
It'd be a backup for the existing pump. There's one pump that can produce fire flow. The other two pumps, so there's three pumps, so two are for domestic, the third is for fire flow. The other two, if the one pump fails, and I don't have any numbers statistically in how often they fail or what age they start to fail. But it is not uncommon, in fact, it's our practice to have redundant systems, right? And up there, we don't have that redundant system. We don't even have the power as the redundant system. We don't have a pump as a redundant system. So that was, and I've thought through this a little bit more over the weekend, and I won't be long on this, but I have thought through this a little bit more on the weekend. And I guess it's because I've come to the realization, I've kind of always thought poorly of the planning of that. At the same time, I've put myself in their situation, and for a phase 1 and a phase 2 development that's going to produce X number of homes, and a phase 3 that's already been drawn out and we know that is on the horizon. Put the pump station in to take care of phase 1 and phase 2, and when you come in with phase 3, we'll do this additional pump station. It's going to cost you, probably that time $700,000 or $800,000. Let's get phase 1 and phase 2 done, get some money coming in, and then with phase 3, then we'll do the bigger pump station that's going to have more pumps. We'll get the redundancy, we'll get the backup power. We would not approve it without the redundancy today, but I guess I'm seeing a little bit more of why it likely wasn't put in back then, and it was just a matter of let's get the development in there. The pumps are my domestic pump for the fire flows, and we know that when phase 3 comes in, it's going to make a better system. It's just, this isn't the best that it can be. So the difficulty when you make those decisions is when phase 3 doesn't come in, and we're not the first city to get bit by the bug of, that future development not taking place because interest rates turn or the developer has personal issues or whatever it might be. So that's not uncommon of a scenario. It's not as uncommon a scenario as what we would hope it would be. But again, the truth is, I've been here for 9.5 years, and even in that time, there's been at least 3 times where that developer has come to the city with plans to develop. So it's not like they've not made any plans. We haven't heard anything there. There has continually been kind of this notion that eventually that phase 3 is going to be built, and when it gets built, we're going to make the improvements there. But I'm with Councilor Kazi, absolutely. And the sentiment of the council, what I'm hearing is this is now a priority project. That's why it got added to the capital improvement list. It did get added with, hey, we're going to try to fund a grant or some other funding source for it so that city residents aren't having to pay for those improvements for that specific neighborhood. And I get that, but what I'm hearing from the council is this is a high enough priority. There's enough fire risk and everything else. We want to make it a priority. So my last argument would really be kind of what I've heard from a couple of council members from there is, if we have water funds available for it, let's use the water funds. Let's pull out a contingency. Let's use the water funds. Let's get that project done. If we can match it with a grant, great. If we can't, let's just do the project and get it done. Let's at least get the generator up there. The redundant pump, I can check on pricing, see what that would look like. But I can tell you we don't have that in this year's budget. It's something we could add to it. We can pull from the contingency more. We can pull from the general fund contingency. So if it's that high a priority, we can do it, but we can definitely use water fund contingency to pay for the backup generator up at Starlight Summit. I mean, it's definitely there. We can't pull from the SDCs or the water fund. We can't pull from that money to pay for the street lights, which is, I think, is the mayor's example. Is that's the one that we can't really pull from. Other than we could pull from the general fund, but again, we're kind of early in the budget year to be pulling money out of contingency for something that there's other funding sources for where we can. So
on this one, I'm going to make a motion to amend that instead of using ARPA funds that we pull from the water fund contingency and on this project. I'll make a motion to amend.
I'll second that. And I have some clarifying questions.
Sure. So I had motion and Councilor Andrade had a motion to amend. Yes, that this project be funded by the water fund contingency rather than the ARPA funds.
yeah, let me just clarify that on that. So you can make the motion here. We will need to bring back staff. You have to give direction to staff to bring something back to make that happen.
Yeah.
But if the spirit of it is, we want staff to use contingency funds and make that happen, that it could happen as early as 2 weeks from now, but it can't happen at tonight's meeting.
That's fine. And so you had some clarification.
Yeah, so that's there in contingency, the 125,000. What, do we have any money already put away towards the project or the capital, like what have we put towards it already? I know we do, because that was part of.
We budgeted the $120,000, but the revenue that we identified was a grant.
Oh, okay.
A future grant that was unnamed, so. In the event that we would apply for a grant and get the grant, then we have the budget to spend that money this year.
So you would have the budget.
We have the, so we're not amending the budget, all we're doing is identifying where that.
Appropriate the contingencies.
So in that case. I would like to amend the motion to pay for half of it
So
with ARPA funds. And half,
Yeah, that's a good question.
she has a motion on the table right now, but.
my motion is that, I'm amending the mayor's motion so that half will be, of the project would be funded by the contingency, water fund contingency, and the other half by ARPA funds.
Do we have a second?
Can I ask a question before I vote on the second?
Well,
Okay.
after you ask a question, then we can have. So fails for. No second.
We need to discuss. This first.
Not for consent.
That's why you seconded it in order to have the conversation.
My question was, aren't we like to need these contingent funds for the water treatment plant for this part where we see to have
Those,
plenty of issues?
yeah, so those projects have their own contingency built into them as a project that's outside of what we're seeing here is a general contingency fund. But your point's well taken. If that contingency gets eaten up, then we will be looking for other funding sources for that. Absolutely.
Councilor Crocker?
A similar thought was, my understanding of contingency is like emergency insurance if we have something come up that we have to do. And it seems a little bit foolish to just use it up. I think, what if, don't we have a lot of the year left to need those? In case we need them.
I'll answer it this way, and I'm really trying to inform,
Yes.
but this is the best way I can answer your question, is if we didn't have ARPA funds available, and we were just talking about the need for this project, what would this stance of the council be? Is it a high enough priority to pull from contingency funds or not? And if it is, then we do, and if it's not, then it's not. So, you know, I guess that's how I would pose it is, if not for ARPA funds, would we be having this discussion about using money from contingency? And if we wouldn't, then we probably shouldn't, right? So that is a good point.
In my mind, the project is important and that we threw it in the capital improvement plan very intentionally last year. And it's a small enough dollar amount that, in my mind, it's always a small enough dollar amount that we can do this project at any time. We just needed to get it into the capital improvement plan so that we could actually start moving it forward, start doing the planning. But it's an important enough project that I think that we should be moving on it. And I don't know, because I'm not on the Public Works Committee. I don't know if there's been enough direction given to staff to move it forward yet.
We have direction. I think we've been very clear that we do it, but honestly, I've not fully engrossed myself in looking at those. We've had some referred to us that we've taken a cursory look at. I've made a few phone calls, but this isn't a project that I've fully taken on and really done a good job hunting. So I'll take responsibility for that. It's not something, we're July, August, we're 2 months into the budget year, and this isn't something that I've spent a lot of time researching yet. And I can commit to doing that if we want to pull the contingency and say, trying to think, I mean, we're kind of at the end of construction season anyway, so honestly, nothing's happening up there with that until probably we get to like early to late spring anyway. They're not going to do projects up there over the winter. So we're really at a point where it's like, if we want to direct contingency funds or even ARPA funds there. We've got some time still to look for some grants to do that project, because I do think that it's a good candidate for some. Other grants that may be out there, it's just, I'm not taking the time.
That's what I need to end up.
I did. I had two comments. First, can we instruct staff to move forward with this project, knowing that we're not going to have to write a check until March or April, and have that time to find money? And if it comes in from a grant or whatever, what do we do with the money that we've allocated tonight for that project? If it comes out of the contingency, that's easy. Goes back into the contingency, but if we do it with these ARPA funds, what happens?
Find another ARPA funding project, another from the ARPA funds.
Right, and then the second question was, can we take a little break?
We can't, yes. We just hit pause because I want to honor if someone needs a break. That's important. So why don't we just take a 7-minute break? Time is it? We'll get back to your question, Councilor Causey, immediately. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Thank you. And Councilor Kazi, you had a comment or question?
I do have a comment and question, and I've been working on trying to get this funded for 3 years. And I started talking to Chris about it then, and it's like, if the money was there, it hasn't been done. And that, you know, I'm sorry, the money is there. I've told my constituents it's there. Raise your voice, and they did express their concern, and they did vote. So, it's not that I don't trust you, but I know that we have this money available. And I've looked into grants, and the most appropriate ones I could find were at least a year away. You know, if we get through this fire season, we'll be lucky. It's not a matter of when or if, it's when. You know, someday there's gonna be a fire here, or we're gonna be having evacuees stay with us. And I think we need to address this issue.
Yeah, I think in the motion on table is to address it. The and the issue is that the councils in the past never brought it forward and got it on the capital improvement plan, right? So it just simply wasn't in the plan. But now we're trying to make it happen. So that's the motion on the table, I think. Or no, it is. Councilor Nielsen?
So is it two parts? One is a generator, one is a backup pump? Is that correct? Is it two parts?
Right now, we just have
So
120,000.
You're just doing the generator, which isn't the backup pump that is used for
No,
fire.
but I think that honestly, we don't know enough about that pump tonight. We don't know the cost. I don't know if it can be put in the existing pump station or not. Or if it would have to be above ground. And quite frankly, I would question why that could be installed in the winter. You know, we're not in a wetland down out there. I don't know why a generator couldn't be installed in November.
But staff, by starting to look at it, we'll be able to figure out those details, right?
I hope so.
So anyway, we have a motion on the table to amend. And it's essentially to draw from the water fund for that project. All in favor of moving up or of amending the motion as stated, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion, or all in opposition, please raise your hand and say nay.
Nay.
So the motion fails. And so now we're going to vote on the original motion. So this would be in taking it out of the ARPA funds and not out of any water funds. So any further discussion on that?
I have a procedural question. If we wanted to we're not allowed to repeat motions unless we were to revisit the question, right? Or revisit the motion.
That's correct.
I guess I'm just going to revisit my motion. I would like to see us do half and half, especially having that discussion regarding the contingencies and the potential confusion between project contingency versus water fund contingency, and asking the important question of how important is this regardless of if we had ARPA funds, would we still fund this? So in that spirit, I would like to revisit the motion that I made for this project to be funded half by ARPA funds, half by contingency funds from the water fund.
Knowing that, do we have a second?
Also,
So we have a second by Council Lehman. Any further discussion? Council Lehman?
yeah, I agree that I don't like the idea of using up the majority of our contingency. I think that's a rainy day thing, and this is not a rainy day thing. This is we've known about it for a long time, and now we just need to act thing. So I want to see it done one way or the other. Try to do it all water contingency, and that didn't work. Trying to do it all ARPA, but that limits other things we can do. So that seems like a good compromise to me, to do it 50-50.
Councilor Carter? No. Yeah, and Chris, do you, I know the word contingency is, that is what we use, but. Is the definition as people are using it, kind of the plan, is it like a rainy day fund, is that the funds that we? I guess, over the years, I've kind of looked at it, it'd be a little bit different. Wondering how you define the use of
I
that.
think this state's definition of that is pretty precise. It's the funds that you. Or it's for expenses that you did not anticipate at the time the budget was passed.
It's not a dedicated reserve, something like that, which is a different.
Sure.
Budget item.
And we have contingencies in our general fund as well. We have contingencies in every fund essentially.
We do, we've been building those up. The general fund contingency is 203,989. Street contingency is 100,000. Water is the 125, wastewater is 120, storm drains 25,000.
So none of them are like back with cash.
No,
No
well,
contingencies out.
that's not funding balance, that's just the contingency. That was, should an expense come up right now that we're not planning to spend money on this year. There's some contingency money should that happen.
So in addition to the contingency, we also have money that's in the water fund that's all allocated for additional projects that are already in the capital improvement plan, is that correct?
Well, it's not in the water fund anymore. Once you transfer landfill equipment towards a specific project, then it's no longer in the water fund. But we do have a balance in that water fund that carries over from year to year as well. We've got. Yeah, but we carry over a healthy amount into landfill equipment from water. This year it was $832,000 that we transferred from the water fund into landfill equipment for specific projects in landfill equipment. So
So I guess are there funds in the water fund that are sitting there that aren't allocated besides the contingency?
Yes. And those are based on projected revenues. We don't know exactly what those revenues can be, but we've made projections. And so we always strive to have more money at the end of the year than what we started with within the operating fund. And then when we know closer what that number is going to be, that's what we then budget as our starting fund balance, which then feeds the rest of the budget for that next year. But we're not allocating. You know, we would. I would caution us from budgeting every dollar that we anticipate getting to the budget, right? We try to be very conservative, so
Yep.
typically. Being conservative means we're gonna bring in more money than what we anticipated spending, and then that, again, that's our ending balance of that next year.
Okay. Okay, so any further questions on this particular topic? All in favor? Okay, so now we're voting on the motion to amend.
One more question. Can we stipulate with this that this gets done as soon as possible? If it's possible, I don't know how long it takes to get the equipment, but October if possible.
I think let's vote on
Okay,
let's vote on this, and that's a different. So this is a motion to amend. We've already voted on the motion to, okay, so this is a motion to carry the motion forward to pay for the generator with half ARPA funds and half water funds. So all in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. And motion carries unanimously. So now I'm gonna go ahead and throw another motion on the table.
We have to do the. Oh, we already did the Clemens one. Right? Never mind.
Motion on the table. I'm just gonna throw a motion out there to utilize the rest of the funds to put it towards street lights on 13th Street. I need a second. No second? Okay, motion fails. Got it.
I would like to make a motion to use the two. I'd like to make a motion to use ARPA funds to install rubber surfacing at Cochrane Memorial Park.
And
Do we have to specify tiles or poured rubber? Do we have to specify?
It's roughly the same cost.
I think maybe park board could discuss that.
okay, any further discussion on that?
Okay, I'm sorry, I fell behind. It was a motion from Counselor Andrade to fund
Rubber surfacing,
rubber surfacing at Cochrane Memorial Park, and who was the second?
Sorry about that. Any, okay, Councilor Cosby?
Are there SDC funds for this or no?
We have. Sorry, doesn't break it out, but I can get there. Or. It's like after Cochrane Park funds have been pulled out, it looks like we have an SDC balance in parks of $160,000. It could go towards future, again, improvement or improvements to the system. So new park, not new equipment, not replacement equipment, but new park. So like any of the expenses of the Cochrane Park would be eligible to the use of this.
Could you repeat that amount again?
160,000.
Councilor Lennon?
Yes, anticipating that we're gonna be doing something with the skate park in the next year or two, would that be considered something we could use the SDC funds for? Because we already have theoretically a skate park, but
You
we
can't
put it in a
use-
different location.
Well, I don't even know if the location matters. You can't use SDCs for maintenance. You could use it probably for replacement that is system increasing or capacity increasing for your system. So if you look at your current skate park and say, yeah, we're not maintaining it, we're demolishing and removing it. But then it's probably SDC eligible. It's in your master plan, that's the other component that has to be there.
I know, Mayor, you feel strongly about the street lights. Is there a way I know there's, what is it, 8 lights needed or whatever? Is there a way if we bought some of the lights that there would be a fund that could, if we'd bought 4 lights from ARPA funds, and then could we find a place for the other 4 lights could be funded in our current budget? I mean,
So streetlights get funded out of the street fund. Our street fund is primarily made or brought in from franchise fees that are collected, get turned through the street fund. That's for the tradition, and then also our monthly street fee that is charged to all of our customers. Anybody that gets a water bill pays into that as well. So that's what makes up our street fund. We do get an allocation from the state, from the gas tax that goes towards street funds. So that money does come in every year, and that's just a matter of what projects we prioritize. Within the capital improvement plan. Streets. We have.
You know your way through this, so.
Well, I'm realizing now, it looks like we've got the. Grab it off of my shelf to give update. Here, there's going to be active. Comfortable siding here with street. Want to grab it real quick?
Yeah, does it look like we got 96,600 approximately left over after the two that we've already voted. And with 4 lights, that would be 80,000, correct? That would still leave us 16,600 to do something else with, like help with the trees at the cross country. If we funded the rubber playground surfacing at Cochrane Veteran Memorial Park with SDCs, we took the 35 out of the 160. We could fund 4 lights and have money for middle school cross-country trees, which I think is really important. And don't have cushion.
Again, I could tell you our street contingency for this fiscal year is $100,000. Last, and this fiscal year, we transferred $38,000 to land building equipment. 2 transfers, 38,000 for equipment, another $150,000 for as future projects. I think that went towards the 16th Street project. So about $188,000 is what we're transferring out of the street fund into like our savings, land building equipment for future expenses. Thanks.
Any other questions, comments? What's your comment?
Counselor Nielsen, could you run through that list of numbers?
Sorry, I'm just trying to figure the person who budgets with a big family, and it's used to me dividing things up. And Jessica had a great idea. So after the 2 things we voted already, we have $96,600 as balance. That is what I've got here. If we fund 4 of the lights, we fund to pay for half of that. That would be 80,000, correct?
Mhm.
That would leave 16,600 to use, for the Downing Forest or other things that we want to fund. If we used SDCs, which we have SEC funds, if we use SDCs to fund the rubber playground, then that would be done as well from SDCs and not from ARPA. So I think we could fund half of the lights, and if we did the other from street contingency.
Maybe
we'd have
street or
enough to-
barrel fund, right? So
Right. Then they don't have to come up with 80,000. So then we can get the lights that would make that project look complete on 13th with the new streetscape project, which you want.
Yeah.
But then we could also still do the parks, the Cochrane. Which I think would be really important.
Yeah, so
I just think we can.
I think we can do all of these projects with the funds we have. But the council has decided they don't want to use the ARPA funds, at least part of the ARPA. So yeah, we can, I know that we can fund all these things. I just think we have to be smart about how we do it.
Does that make sense now, what I mentioned?
Absolutely.
That gives us plenty of funds to work with Downing Forest. And
Is that a motion?
Oh, okay, I will make a motion.
We have a motion on.
Oh, we do, sorry.
Yeah.
To amend, I would make a motion to amend the current motion to fund the Cochrane rubber surface through ARPA and make it through SDCs. And then to fund 4 of the lights for 13th Street for a total of $80,000 with ARPA funds. And that will be it for now. We'll figure out the rest of the balance. That's all I've got in my head.
Any further questions? Or I'm sorry, you have a motion, I'll second. Any comments, questions?
Yeah, you said to use ARPA to fund the 4 lights, and then
Correct.
what for the other 4 lights? The which
Street. Street fund.
all from the street funds,
Or, well,
the combination of street in general.
yes, that would be good. Go for that.
We can like, yeah,
That would give us the 8 lights, correct? That's
Yep.
what we need. And that would still leave a balance.
16.
my question is for Chris. Chris, does that all sound like that's?
Or my math is checking out, yes.
We
So I've
need-
got Starlights was 80,000, Starlights, streetlights for 80,
No, Charlotte was 60, wasn't it?
Starlight is.
Starlight 60, streetlights 80. 3,400 for primary school. That's gonna leave us 17,600.
I've got 16,600 too.
Yes, 16,600.
So that's being looked at, doable.
And then we're still considering,
And we'll have to, then we have to vote on this.
so we could vote on this and then we could still consider contributions towards country or leaderboard or whatever. Well, I guess this is Clinton.
Confirm that I've got the motion correct.
Yes.
I'm gonna read what I wrote, and you tell me if it's right. To amend the motion to fund the Cochrane Rubber Playground Surface through SDC and fund 4 of the 13 street lights for 80,000 with ARPA funds and a combination of street and general funds to fund the balance.
Balance of the lights.
Yeah, the 4 lights.
The 4 lights.
Balance of the lights.
Yes, correct.
Let staff look at that and figure out like what makes sense.
Mhm.
We can then bring it back to us. They need clarification.
Mike loves these puzzles. Find me some more money, Mike.
Councilman John,
Chris, can you repeat what is left? How much this would be tally wise with the other 2 projects, and then how much we would have left? I was doing other stuff.
Yeah, so I have Starlight for
Mhm.
the electric, for the backup generator, $60,000.
Yeah.
Kudos have. And then we talked about the primary school, 3,400.
Mhm.
Then we've got street lights. We're doing half of that, so that's $80,000.
Mhm.
So that gets the total cost of 143,400.
Mhm.
Which leaves us a balance of 16,600 for other.
Thank you.
I just want to pause and say you guys are doing great, and this is a great problem to have. But it's tough, and I get it, so I appreciate your time, and this is, you want to. I really, really appreciate the time that you're giving to this stuff. Because so, all of that said, there's been great collaboration and working together here, and we just need to keep going because we're close. We're at 16,600, right?
haven't voted on it yet.
We haven't voted yet.
Councilman,
Yeah, I'm just a little concerned that we're gonna use up the park SDCs and then we're gonna have to figure out how we're gonna fund the skate park down the road. And I know that there are grant opportunities, but there's grant opportunities for literally anything. So I don't know if that's a valid argument on how we're gonna fund things, because there are grant opportunities, but they seem to be getting much more competitive also.
Councilman,
I agree with that.
yeah, and I know that we utilize the SDCs where we can, and we utilize our different funds as we can. You know, we always have the general fund, but to me, the general fund are the most valuable types of money that we have. ARPA is essentially general fund, but
My son-in-law is on several boards with special education and physical education. And being as our education system, we have so many students that are high anxiety and high depression. They're finding that exercise and outdoor activities are promoting better mental health as well. And he mentioned that down the road that he's on several committees that are working on federal funding and federal things to include for parks and for school playgrounds. So he foresees in the upcoming years, not too far advanced, that we're going to have a lot of funds coming just because we have a huge mental health crisis among children.
Sure.
And they're trying to fix that, seeing now that maybe kids need a little more physical activity than screen time.
Gotcha.
So I am really optimistic, as is he. Nothing, but it's maybe true.
No, it's obvious. They need
So,
that.
he's feeling very positive about what is going to be possible in his city with, on the committees and things that he's working with. So I'm hopeful that if that's true, that even maybe we will be able to get some of that, not only for there, but for additional things for our schools and
Sure.
parks. So that's a positive thing.
That's awesome. Just keep in mind, we can't directly use federal funds.
Just to maybe save some of our SD funds, whatever they're called, SDC funds, we've got 16,000.
We haven't voted on this amendment.
Okay, 10,000 towards the park.
So we have a motion on table to amend. And it was Councilor Nielsen's motion. Any further discussion on that? Okay, all in favor of amending the motion as stated, please raise your hand, say aye.
It's 10,000 for-
No, she hasn't.
Okay, sorry.
The remaining balance would still be 16,600. You wanna work, Ruth, would you want to read the motion approximately?
We had an action to amend to add funding for the rubber surface at Cochrane Memorial Park. This motion was to amend that motion to fund the Cochrane Memorial Playground rubber surface through SDCs and fund 4 of the 13th Street lights for 80,000 with ARPA funds and a combination of street and general funds to fund the balance of the lights. And use a combination.
And that would, and just in summary, that would leave us 16,600, which we can still have a conversation about after this vote. This is just a motion to amend. All in favor of amending the original motion, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All opposed, please raise your hand and say nay.
Nay.
Motion carries 4-2. Now we have an amended motion. Any further discussion on the amended motion?
Is this where I mentioned, because we just voted to use SDC funds. And now I would like to suggest that we
Yeah.
We didn't.
This is just
We voted
to change the motion.
Or-
If we vote on this, then it'd be a great time for you to bring that up. Yeah. So now we're going to vote on the amended motion to implement all of what we just discussed. Any further conversation? Do we need clarification?
The motion is to, essentially the motion that we just made, and then that's the motion now on the table. So the original motion by Councilor Andrade has been amended. And the new motion now on the table is to spend $80,000 for streetlights. And that the surfacing at Cochrane Park will be paid for out of SDC funds. Period.
Okay, so all in favor of passing that amended motion, please raise your hand and say aye. All opposed, please raise your hand and say nay. So motion carries 4-2. Okay, so now we have about 16,600, and I would entertain a motion. Councilor Crocker.
I'd like to make a motion to use 10,000 of that towards the rubber coating so that we are not pushing our SDC funds to the limit.
You're actually wanting to amend the previous motion.
No, it's a new motion.
Yeah,
It
but
was just change the-
yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
So take 10, you want to use 10,000 from SDC funds is what you should?
No,
Sorry.
no.
ARPA funds.
Okay, got it. Okay,
Of the 16,600 remaining that hasn't been voted on yet. The motion is to take 10,000 of that 16,600 and put it towards the playground surfacing at Cochrane Park.
I'll
Which would
second.
reduce the amount of money that we need to pull from SDCs.
got it.
Councilor Causey seconded it.
Yep. Okay, so any further discussion? All in favor of passing the motion as stated, please raise your hand, say aye. All opposed, please raise your hand, say nay. Motion carries 4-2. Now we have 2,006.
No, 6,600. Yep, do we not?
Yep.
Oh, you're right.
6,600.
Okay. So that would be, sounds like that would be about the right amount to send towards, to use with, for the school or set aside for the school to put some trees in maybe?
I think that'd be a generous number to have available to put towards the school, yes.
Okay, so I will like to make a motion that we contribute 6,600 to the Downing Forest for the Philomath School District for the planting of trees.
Oh.
Limited to pine trees. I'm
Oh,
not sure
okay,
what's-
Okay, well, to restore
Creating the course.
of cross-country course and aiding whatever measure they need on the Downing Forest.
We have a motion on the table. We have a second.
Mhm.
A motion made by Counselor Nielsen, seconded by Counselor Clocker. Any further discussion?
You can get 5 of these spinning things.
One of the same things.
All in favor, please give your hand, say aye. Aye, motion carries unanimously. Okay. We have gone through one item.
That was hard. That was,
That was hard.
That was the big one.
Yeah, it was.
Ian Sweet million.
So let's go ahead and move on to DEI training. Chris, you want to walk us through that, or is that Counselor Andrade?
So as a recap, the Inclusivity Committee a while back had recommended to council that we enter into an agreement to have DEI training from Oregon State University's institutional education for DEI. What we did not know prior to that recommendation and council's approval was that they only offer training within a certain time frame on weekdays. And so, perceiving that there's a potential schedule constraint, the committee discussed what our second recommendation would be if the council decided that we didn't want to proceed with Oregon State University's training. And so the committee then recommended Western Oregon University's one-day JEDI training as an alternative training option. And we brought that to council, and there was questions about wanting more information. So I copied and pasted everything from the Inclusivity Committee agenda item summary into this agenda item. So hopefully that answers questions. And the question now is deciding whether the council wants to proceed with training from Oregon State University or from Western University or some other direction.
I just have a question about the Western Oregon. It looks like it's talking about 30 hours of training. Which is a lot in my mind.
It's not 30 hours of training. Sorry to interrupt. It just wanted to let you know that so it was synchronous, a 6-week course or as a one-day. I had put both options on there in case the council decided that they'd rather do the Zoom course, but the actual recommendation by the committee was to do the one-day 6-hour workshop, especially in anticipation that that the council would prefer that. And also, if I remember correctly, I think we thought that would probably suit us better anyway for learning.
Thank you. Counselor Nielsen, you have anything?
I just, number of participants for the 2-hour, $3,000 flat rate. How many participants would that include?
However many we would like.
Any other? Counselor
Does
Clocker?
anybody have an estimation of how many people we are talking about training? Is it just city council, or is it staff, or is it community members, or what? I mean, are we just talking 7 of us? Or are we talking?
I think you're probably gonna be in the 6 to 12 range.
To clarify, the committee had recommended that staff participate, especially those who work with council, like interface with council and or the public. And then also to allow the option for committee members to attend, like on the city's advisory committees and commissions and boards. Of course, that was the recommendation. What council decides is another matter.
My comment is, I think any of them sound great. The only issue is that the particular time and date
Mhm.
is going to be really important in order to determine whether or not, whether it's 2 hours or 6 hours, whether or not I will be able to participate. But I'm just one person, so all 7 of us, I know and more is just gonna be a challenge.
I think generally speaking, that 2-hour work session is gonna be during the work day, and that was the concern, is
Yes.
it's gonna be Monday through Thursday. 9 to 5, and maybe 8, or like a 9 to 3, 9 to 4 kind of thing, finishing up. So that was the main constraint on that first one, is that it's gonna be during the work week, which is difficult for people that have full-time jobs and have, not as easy to get off. So the alternate to that is we could do a Saturday, that one's longer, it's 6 hours, but obviously you're gonna get more out of 6 hours on a Saturday than 2 hours on a, Wednesday afternoon. Relatively speaking. So those are kind of the choices. It's really about, are there council members that are gonna be able to be available on a weekday for 2 hours? Or is that just not gonna work for us and we just need to look at doing a weekend, but doing a Saturday or something?
Some work days work great, some don't.
And we could schedule this far enough out that if we felt like that was the issue, we'll put out there. And I think before I recommended doing that, but I really feel like we need to answer this question first, if we want to do that before we try to start trying to schedule something. Because that'll be not just according to this schedule, but also with them.
Just for me, I mean, it doesn't really matter, like, work days are fine as long as I know and then wait for an event. So then.
Yeah, I think I'd lean more towards the Jedi training, do it in one fell swoop. And I like the idea of being able to invite other people that are serving on committees and whatnot. If they want to. I don't think, we shouldn't do anything to like strong arm people to do it, but if we're gonna be holding something presumably here at City Hall, then if we can get 10 more people in the room, I think that's just better for the community in general. So I would lean that direction.
Yeah, 20, you get a great discount.
One caveat though is I'd like to make sure that's not on Oregon State home football.
You're serious, and he's serious.
Counselor Collins.
One thing with that is that we're paying $260 a person, so if we're opening it up to a lot of people, that's a whole lot higher cost. And I have a question for perhaps Chris. If we were to invite staff that works here. I thought we had a discussion earlier that they would not come on a weekend, that they would possibly do it during the week, and would they even be able to be freed up to do it during the week?
I did some quick math, so $3,000 is about 11 people if you do the 260 per person. If you drop down to 250 per person, you're talking 12 people and go up. So just to kind of onions to onions, right? So if it was, I think either way, my management team's going to get invited, and they'll likely half will come and half won't come. Half of them feel pretty strongly that they get training DEI at their annual conferences they go to. But the other half would probably come just to be with council and have some time with the council and learn together, right? I think that would be true for either case. I think when you start talking about other committee members and other that, I just don't really have a good feel for, members of the planning commission, members of the Inclusivity Committee. I just really don't have a good feel what's gonna be more attractive to them, something in the middle of the day or something on a Saturday. And the focus is really on the council and everybody else. I think either way, get extended invitations, I would be a little more selective maybe if we go with the 260 per person, just to, do that, but again, I'm not opposed to spending $260 for a planning commissioner to attend 6 hours of DEI training either. I think that's a good use of those funds, so I don't know that I would really be that much more restrictive on the $260 per person and the flat rate. I think we should fill the room.
So then I have one more question.
Okay.
If we were to do it for the 2 hours during the week, who could not come if it was like from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock or something like that?
Would very much depend on the day,
You would not be able to,
depends on the day.
and you would not be able to.
No, I work from home. I can be here
Oh.
anytime.
Yeah, but maybe.
No, I'm often available during the day, it just depends on the day.
Yeah, I might also be in Albuquerque.
So it makes a difference whether we're gonna be hitting all of us or just 2 of us, so I think that's.
I think we say we're gonna do it, and it's gonna be during a work day, and then you say, next April, are you available on April 25th? And I would have it penciled out for, some far date in the day. If it was between now and December, it would be a problem. In January, I haven't scheduled anything yet.
Another option, if we were leaning towards the Western Oregon University training. Like, I don't want to limit it at all. I also know that we're limited based on funding availability to some degree. What we could consider doing is, saying that whoever wants to go, whoever wants to attend the training, who are on committees, boards and commissions, could not apply, but like, write down that they're interested, and if there's more interest. Okay, kind of like prepaying for a workshop, like we're gonna have like 15 spaces available, and go ahead and like we'll take up to 15 people, and if we have more than that, then we'll like randomly draw to allow them to attend, kind of the thing. So that is another option. But I am down for whatever.
Councilor Carter?
I would like to clarify, I'm assuming they're coming here to do the training.
They will come here from both places.
Does anyone feel strongly about either training being? That we should, anyone will make a motion?
Just from reading the summary materials and everything like that, I'm totally turned off by the Oregon State one. I just really am. It just
What
seemed,
if they brought a beaver flag?
doesn't matter.
What if it's on game day? No, okay.
No, I'm not impressed by the way they worded everything. The material right here.
Yeah, that's good feedback. Do I have a motion?
I'd like to move that we move forward with the Jedi 101 1-day 6-hour workshop. And we schedule something for as soon as practicable.
You think it's a weekday or weekend? Do you care?
Doesn't matter.
Okay, so then we could direct staff to do some sort of a poll amongst all of us, and we can identify what works for us and then invite others.
Sure. I'm not putting that in my motion.
But that's general understanding. That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have motion on the table. I'll second it.
See,
It's getting late and I've only had.
I'll second it. And any further discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Carries. Awesome.
You can serve out this week.
Okay. Can we skip the next one? Just go on to the Facade Grant program.
It's not happening.
No, Morty's idea.
It's not.
We tabled this for 2 years.
We table this 3 years from now. Okay. Who's gonna take lead on this one?
I'll let Luke speak. I'll introduce the other bit, and then we'll hear from Jim on some of his concerns and thoughts, but the number kind of says it all. We're happy for Jim, obviously, and David, and wish them all the best, happy retirement, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll plan a big fiesta and everything else as we post. But for now, the attention that we need from the council is what we need to figure out some legal counsel for the city. I provided some information from the charter, provided some information from League of Oregon City handbook. just to give some guidance there. The city attorney works for you as the counsel. They don't work for me, they report to me. We work in collaboration with staff, but really they do work directly for you. And they've been a resource for you, and Jim, they've both been excellent at that over the years. So all that said, staff really at this point, we're just asking you to give some direction to go ahead and get our people together. I do not believe that we have capacity to have a full-time council just dedicated to Philomath as a city employee. So nor do I think we'd be better by that. So I think we're gonna be looking for a small firm, maybe an individual that's linked in with a firm that can give some time. The caveat here is who will be doing prosecutions for us. So that may be the side wrinkle. The group that we go with, depending on what it is, that there are people who include that as a need, right, that we have. Depending on the responses that we get to that, we may get a little mixed bag. Some may be interested in the attorney stuff, but not the prosecution. Likely we'll have some interested in the prosecution, but not in doing the city attorney stuff, right? So, but the RFP, in my mind, we put it together, we package it, we put it out and kind of see what comes back to us is my recommendation. But I'm happy to get feedback on that, and you know, Jim's got some thoughts on that as well. I would say I know he's been in some discussions already with different attorneys around. Sticker shock is the word that he continues to use, but I'll let him speak to that. So for tonight, all we're looking for from you is direction for staff to get an RFP ready. We'll prep that and have it ready for your September meeting. You'll have a chance to review that RFP, make any comments, suggestions we need to make, and then we'll get that released. Give some time, probably a month, for those to come back in before your October meeting. And then it'll be a selection process November, and before you know it, we're going to be into January, February, and end of March is when Jim's hoping to go into the sunset. So we have some time, but we don't have like a ton of time. We need to start this process. So with that, Jim, I'll let you give him.
Dave and I are getting old. Catherine found another position, and we're glad for her. That's nice, but a lot of our planning was thinking, okay, how do we have her and the other folks who work for us land well? This changed. March 31st works out pretty well to give you some lead time and to give us enough time early next year to hand over the lots of boxes that we have, going back to 1988 on some things. Sticker shock is gonna come, as I think the disservice that we've done for some of our clients, including Philomath, is we have not billed enough and haven't increased rates over the years sufficiently. And part of that's just I'm a lousy businessman. But what we're seeing are hourly rates from the firms that do municipal law for small cities and for large cities for that matter, that are in the $235 to $450 range, mostly depending on the experience of the attorneys who are doing the work and the type of work. Prosecution work is a little bit on the cheaper side. That's good. I think that you may, as Chris was saying, have the opportunity to kind of split things up in some different ways. I can't tell you how many people are out there right now looking for this kind of work at all. What the local firms are telling me, it is hard to get people to move to this part of the state at all. That they were having problems recruiting lawyers, and that both the wages that they pay lawyers who just are higher than what people are able to pay at the hourly rates those lawyers will be able to make. So, $150,000 a year, maybe work 30 hours a week and not work evenings or weekends. It's a different thing, and that competition, just as you're seeing all other professional areas right now, it's hard to find people. Cities that are recruiting in-house, and there's no earthly way you could afford in-house counsel without doing away with some of the departments completely, are often taking years to recruit somebody. It's not a matter of months. It's McMinnville's been looking for somebody for about 4 years now, with a range from, we'll pay you 117 to 170,000 a year, depending on your experience. Yes, you can work from home. We don't, and they have not been able to successfully close on that. Kaiser, Salem, Portland, all kind of in the same boat that I think if we can find somebody local who wants to do this, it's rewarding. It's it's a tremendously cool intellectual exercise, and you get to work with great people. And though I will help Chris and you, we'll pull things that other cities are using to find legal services and to recruit. My suspicion is that it's going to be hourly, not a fixed amount, because I think that's where people want to be. And then I think part of what you have to do is you talk to your staff and your city manager yourself and say, okay, what can we do without? And what discipline do we impose on the time that we have our lawyers spend on stuff?
Great, thank you, Councilor Lannis.
You know what Corvallis is gonna do?
They don't know what they're gonna do. So they're in the same place you were.
One other question. Municipal law seems like a very specific thing. Is it, or is it just my perception that it's very specific?
So municipal law is specific. Like all government things, it's kind of like private practice, only not. And the example that I would give is purchasing. That you can go, we can go as a private business and we can hire somebody to do something and they'll do it and they'll tell us how much it's going to cost and we pay them for that. Government can't do that. There's going to be a set of rules so that it's fair and so that there's a competitive process and that there's a way for people to protest and appeal those processes. And you might start with, this is the thing we're going to buy, or this is who we would like to do this work. And on the other end, you may get something, well, that is not what I had in mind at all. As you know, sometimes the process part of things is more important than the result, which is kind of a weird thing, but it is the nature of government. And the example tonight on this vacation, which is not a particularly complicated thing conceptually, but oh wait, it's also a land use decision, and it's oh wait, this is a piece of public property, so we've, even though it has little value, no value to the city, how do we manipulate this? And it takes your city recorder, 3 engineers, a lawyer, and a surveyor to work that. So it's a field. It is possible to learn. Give people the grace to make mistakes. My goal has always been not to make the same mistake repeatedly. That there are all kinds of new mistakes to make, and that's the fun of this job.
Okay, well, I'm going to make a motion that we direct staff to prepare a request for proposals for legal counsel and present it to the council review at the next available meeting.
Second.
Any further discussion?
It says we don't have enough stuff to have an in-house counsel, but can we share one with Corvallis? And is that what you're thinking.
Which I think we would see that in the RFP process. We'd have somebody reply. I'm in good communications with Mark Shepherd over at Corvallis and what their proposal they're looking at. They're likely, I presume, gonna go out with some type of RFP on, here's our needs.
I don't think they can afford to go in-house and meet their needs.
Sharing
I
would
think
be-
it would be, well, even then, I think it is so costly to have an attorney as an employee that the benefit that most of our government clients have had is they don't have to pay us PERS or insurance, all of those things that we should have included in our overhead and our billing. And there's an infrastructure to support legal services that's expensive in-house. And it's a lawyer, but they also need, a paralegal or a legal assistant and a lights and books and stuff, where you don't want to give people too much. It'll make them expect more.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions? Seeing none, all in favor of passing the motion as stated, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. We talked about the facade improvement program.
Could be quick, or we can see how quick it goes and bump it if we need to. I do have a couple businesses that would love to have a decision tonight.
And we have an executive session.
We start the discussion and see where we.
Should we just do the ordinance on the franchise agreement first? Do you want to cover that?
I can cover it. The general summary is pretty straightforward. So this is for Peak Internet. They do business Peak Internet. It's Casco Communications. So this is our standard franchise agreement for telecommunications. So it's very similar to what we saw from Alerica, other than the names and dates have been changed. I did hear, and I put that in there from the CEO. They're not looking for new customers in Philomath, so they're not going to neighborhoods. They just need to be on our public right of way so they can get through the Queens Valley and other hubs where they have customers reaching out from them. So they don't anticipate paying anything more than just the minimum $750 per year or $750 per month for who knows how long. So, but they recognize the need for the franchise agreement, and so they've asked the city council to get that approved. The way that's done is through ordinance. That's what we're looking at. I will just mention, we're looking at a franchise agreement update from Comcast, and we're also looking at a franchise agreement with Pioneer that's in the works. And so those will be coming soon as well. I'll let Helen into this.
Question, is there a reason, should they all be the same? Is there any reason we shouldn't increase the franchise fee? Sounds like they have to go through the loan anyway.
Yeah, the telecommunications ones, we try to keep them standard for like businesses, telecommunications.
And that's kind of a component of federal law.
Yeah.
That you can't have. It's one of those.
Yeah, I thought we just.
It's a barrier to entry if you treat somebody differently than they say, yeah, that increase was a barrier to my getting the same stuff that everybody else has.
No, it's pretty, again, this is our standard for telecommunication. So,
I'd like to move that we approve ordinance 878, granting a non-exclusive franchise to Casco Communications.
Like, have me just read the ordinance then.
Sure.
Okay. This is an ordinance granting Casco Communications Inc., DBA Peak Internet, non-exclusive franchise for the provision of telecommunications services within the city of Philomath.
We can get a roll call vote.
What is the CPI's aerial infrastructure that you refer to?
they've got something out in Kings Valley that something antenna or something out there. That would be my guess. They've got some telecommunication power in Kings Valley that they need to get a fiber network to.
Okay, thank you.
We get a roll call vote.
Yes.
Ruth Cozy,
Yes.
Diane Crocker.
Yes.
Matt Lehman,
Yes.
Lisa Nielsen,
Yes.
Jeff Jones.
Yes. Let's try the facade improvement program, see how quick this goes.
We recommend a motion on the back page. This went through the finance and admin committee. We have a facade improvement loan program right now. It's been utilized. It's not been heavily promoted the last several years because money's been geared towards streetscapes and all the attention been towards streetscapes. And mostly we've determining what the facade was gonna look like, if we're gonna have Timbertown theme or whatever theme is gonna influence facades. So we've not publicized a lot, which is the primary reason why it hasn't been utilized, but those funds are there. And so my recommendation was rather than continue with the loan program, to convert that into a grant program. I'm recommending a pilot project for this first year to do 3 projects with a $10,000 matching grant. We receive a kind of 2-step application process. The first would be an initial just to verify ownership, et cetera. We refer them to Neil Richardson, who I've talked with. He's a local architect. He's going to spend time with them, helping them establish the current look and what improvements they'd like to make. Did some pictures of some of the Timbertown type elements that we'd want them to incorporate. And then he would have a rendering done up that would show the new building with the new facade essentially. That would then get submitted with their final application to the city. And then we would review all of the applications that we received and pick the top 3. So it would be hopefully somewhat of a competitive process where, I'd love to get 4 or 5 applications and pick the top ones. Do those this year and then use those as examples for future years for future funding. So again, it is up to $10,000, but $300 would go to Mr. Richardson included in that thing. So that I could use the money for permits, I could use the money for that sort of it, but the intent here is that up to $10,000 would be matching. That means that they're investing up to $10,000 of their own private money as well. Right? So if they only put in $4,000, they're not going to get 10 from us. They'd only get 4 from us, including the 3 that they include for their application. So that's how the program would work. Obviously, we'd love to get a $40 or $50 or $100,000 facade improvement on some of these buildings. And if we can help out with $10,000 that they don't have to pay back and it's there, that's the incentive to get them to spend their 10 or 20 or 30 or $50,000 in addition to that. It'll really kickstart the downtown, look and feel the downtown area. So that's the big push right now. Really, I see a couple of choices. We can keep it as just a loan program. We can renegotiate what those terms would be if we want to do like a 0 interest loan or a 2% loan or something. Obviously, the benefit of that is that money comes back in over time. If we get a 3-year or 5-year window to come back. The disadvantage is it's not as attractive to a property owner. And give me some money today, I'll pay you back over time is great, but it's not as good as $10,000 grant money that I don't have to pay back and put directly in the building and move forward with the tenants. So those are kind of the options. I did provide kind of a summary of how the program would work. Is that first attachment, and then again some photo pictures of some of the Timbertown type elements if you want to see downtown area. We haven't done this in downtown. This would be for any building in the commercial district. It would have to be commercial building, commercial district. No outstanding non-compliance, that sort of it would be all be in the checklist for the app.
If someone applies, checks the boxes, but we just decide that's not really the project we want to fund, we have that option.
Yeah, so we'd have a matrix, a scoring matrix, and we look for the committee to find things that they didn't like about the project that would make it less desirable than another.
The individual you mentioned would be the city's contracted architect that you referred to.
Right.
What was the name?
Neil Richardson.
Okay. And the grants would not exceed 10,000.
Right.
You left out the word not. And the review committee consists of your members of the city. Chamber of Commerce. Commissioner and a city councilor. And how are those people being chosen? Planning commissioners.
Let the plan commission pick volunteers, and if there was more than one, they would vote themselves. Similar here, ask for volunteer. If multiple people are interested, we can take a vote. Yeah, so the idea is to get the committee together. They're only gonna meet, once a year, just to look and review those applications. Maybe well, I think it's one meeting. I think really it's, here's the criteria, here's what we're looking at, here's a score sheet. Here's the applications we received. Let's go through, talk about them, score them individually, pull it together. So that's one meeting a year. For this pilot program, we're really just saying, should we try it this 1 year, $30,000? And if it flops, if we don't get any applications, if we don't like the process, this is a pilot year and we just advertise it as that, and we kind of regroup and take it from there. But again, we've already had questions and people asking about, hey, are there any funds available for, needing improvements? And it's like, well, I'm taking a program. I took a program to the finance committee a couple months ago. I need to influence the council. That's happening at the end of the month. I'll get back to you. And so there is interest out there from business owners.
With those clarifications, I move that we approve the Facade Grant program as presented.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Comment? Councilor Drive.
Couple questions. The scoring matrix, is that something that the council will be able to look over, or is that a staff thing? How?
Yeah, I can bring that back to the council. You want to take a look at that? Yeah.
And then I know, I brought this up in the committee meeting before, that I think it would be a good idea to put some sort of length of time, like, in the actual description of the program. Because currently it just says applications will be received 1 to 2 times per year with appropriate notice and time. And I think it would be important to standardize that. Like, I know it's just a pilot project, and also to have that information would be, I guess, because I see two kind of deadlines. One, to be able to submit, I could be misunderstanding this, but one, in order to submit interest, to be able to design something with the architect, and then you submit your final application. And I'm just a little concerned that some people might not apply until towards the end, and like there might be a backlog with the architect. And so
Let me do this, because when I wrote this, I wasn't sure when I was going to be here presenting to the council. So let me put an application together, and the application is going to include the matrix, and it'll include the specific timeline.
awesome.
If this gets approved tonight, then I kind of know in my mind what time frame I'm working on. I can put those specific dates in there.
That would be awesome.
I'll just want to bring it back to you the next meeting in a couple weeks. What I can tell the business owners is, hey, it's been approved. I'm putting the application together. Council's gonna look at that September 11th, and if everything looks good, we can have the applications available September 12th. So I can put that together. I'll just make sure all that's in there, because we don't want any concerns from the properties. We want to be very clear what the program is, what the steps are, what the scoring is going to be, so they know how to score well. We'll just put that all right in the application itself.
Awesome. Thank you.
Are we gonna put a time limit on them to complete the project, so they don't just sit on the money?
Yeah. In my mind, it's like 2 years. But we can include that in the application as well.
Okay, so see no more questions. All in favor, please raise your hand, say aye. Very good. Thank you much.
It's exciting. I think I really jump start. Yeah, no, great.
So we have reports and written reports, and I encourage you to reach out to Chris or the company for any questions, but I think it's getting late. I think we should move to the question.
I have one more thing that I would like to ask. And our Inclusivity Committee meeting happened on last Tuesday. Couldn't get in information. I sent an email to everyone with information about a petition for the a state petition for Indigenous Peoples' Day to be a paid holiday and non-school day for staff, students, and public workers in Oregon. And so we discussed that at the committee. We agreed that we wanted to sign the petition as a committee. And we recommended to council that we also sign it. And since it's kind of a timely thing, I was hoping to be able to read it and.
Actually, that was like an individual counselors can sign that, right?
Individual counselors can sign it, and also it would be very meaningful if the council, if we did decide to sign as a council, it would be very meaningful, I think, for our city to put support behind this,
Yeah, so,
should we choose to do so.
yeah, I think you can make a motion that and see if there's a second right now, but I know it's also late. I would advocate for not doing this tonight. Because it's too late. Everybody's here.
Or is there
I mean, the idea is for it to be in time for this year's Indigenous Peoples' Day, which is on October 9th. But like, I don't know when the decision is actually being made, but it would be great to do it sooner rather than later.
Just get it on the agenda.
Well, that's why I'm asking. It's not that long of a petition that I was hoping to read and see if. So my motion is that this is, I'm sorry, I don't have a really good motion, but my motion is that, this topic that the committee had recommended that council sign, this petition, I would like the council to consider it
Okay.
in this meeting prior to executive session.
Got a second. Seeing none, motion fails. And with that. We can come back, we're gonna go into the executive session.
And I have one question, regarding the, report from the Inclusivity Committee on Proclamation and Resolution Procedures. I know it's in the report section, but we are also looking for feedback.
there's a recommended motion there to like, get feedback from the city council to approve the inclusive procedures for. Because of the proclamation and resolution, which come back to the city council. So I think what the inclusivity committee is looking for is, hey, here's our procedures and policies for getting there. Is the council good with that and on board with that? It would be.
Yeah, I looked at it, it looked great to me, but I'll make a motion that we move forward with that process. Do I have a second?
Yep.
Do I have, Councilor Crocker made a seconded, conversation?
I guess I question if there's an emergency. Says newer emergency proclamation may be made by the mayor or city council without consultation. However, should time be available, such proclamation will be presented for comment, but if it's unrelated to inclusivity, it seems to me that that should be worded such that it may be presented for comment.
I suppose it could benefit from some sort of specificity as to something related to diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility.
Yeah, I read this under the topic of letter A, inclusivity proclamation and resolution procedures. So in my mind, this would be limited to inclusivity proclamations, resolutions.
That's
But
why I read it.
it isn't very clear there, but I think that can be applied. I don't anticipate the inclusivity committee wants to see all proclamations, but just those that have some type of inclusivity component to them.
Is there any reason why the inclusivity committee could not present its calendar to the council?
We did.
Yeah, I think we have to that. Questions? Seeing none, all in favor of passing the motion as stated, please raise your hands, guy.
Aye.
Opposed, please raise your hands. No. Okay, motion carries 5-1. With that, we're gonna go ahead and move into executive session, and I have a statement that we're gonna move into executive session. For the purpose of consultation with legal counsel concerning legal rights and duties regarding current litigation or litigation file. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.6602H, which allows the council to meet in executive session to conduct the discussion. Representatives of the news media and designated staff and other designated persons shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during executive sessions, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No final decision may be made in executive session. At the end of the session, we will return to open session and welcome any waiting audience back into the room with open arms. I would remind the council's members and the staff that the confidences in this executive session belong to the council as a body and not to the individual members. These confidences should be disclosed if the city council as a body approves such a disclosure. A member or staff person does not believe that they can maintain these confidences, then I would invite that member or staff person not to participate in the executive session. Boom.
I'll be just continuing.
Okay. All right. Jim?
So, update on where we are with the reservoir slab issue.
Wait, we're live still.
It says that, yeah, I saw that too.
Well, then let's wait for that.
Is she going out to unplug us? or-
Locked in the door.
Stopped, but not the live.
Well, I'm stopping.
Those 3 people are just about to get a treat.
Just says live on the- Okay.
We're still live streaming.